people who are watching from our YouTube stream. And it's 7 o'clock now, so I will turn over to Mayor Polderman.
Good evening and welcome to the June 8th regular council meeting. I'm calling it in order at 7 p.m. We'll move on to item 2, the adoption of the agenda. Would someone like to make a motion for
I'll move the adoption.
Thank you. Are there any late items? Councillor Hay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Under paragraph 18 of our procedure bylaw, when anybody brings forward a late item, all councillors must agree with it, and that doesn't mean they agree with the topic, just agree with me bringing them on the table. Also, there's going to be a couple of motions, and 18B states that I should have passed out at the table some information, but not. There's only 2 of us at the table, so I've kept my language pretty simple. Number 1 is from the May 11th regular meeting, para 14, under unfinished business or business arising. Second one, and the mayor will poll council individually on these after I've read them. May 31st special meeting. Talk about the purpose of funds from the 18.3 and the MOU. Third, donation cards, and there will be a motion with this one, and it will be under Councillor Hayes' report. And number 4, debris removal, heritage work, and soil remediation, also under Councillor Hayes' report. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. All in favor of allowing these items on the agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Thank you. So we'll add those items to the agenda. Are there any other late items? Seeing that there's none, could I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
I'll motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
Okay,
Second.
thank you.
Councillor Hayes, second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. So that would move us on to delegations, and our first delegation is BC Hydro's Infrastructure Restoration Progress Report from Mary Ann Cools and Community Relations Derek Cools, Interconnections Manager. The floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having us here. I'm Derek Curl. I'm Leader Distribution Interconnections Manager. I've met many of you before in the virtual forum. I've got our Community Relations Manager, Mary Ann Cools, here with me. I'm going to walk you through an update and presentation on the status of the BC Hydro work in the village of Lytton. Just give me a moment while I share my screen.
Derek Curl. Derek Curl was the person going to be sharing a screen.
Well, I'm just going to take a moment here to mute someone who's not muted at their home. So just a reminder to participants to please keep your mic muted while the meeting's in progress. Thank you.
Okay, is my screen viewable?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, as I mentioned, I've got Mary Ann Cools here with me. So as of this week, we're almost complete with all of the debris removal. There's a few pictures here of it in progress. We had our contractor Dixon with spooling up wire, removing large bundles of wire, insulators, and the rest of the conductors. There is a little bit of remaining work. I believe there's 3 or 4 steel pole support stubs that are on the west side of Fraser. We had expected to try and remove those this week. It looks like it will be next week, pending the results of heritage requirements. Overall, I believe the cleanup looks pretty good. We spoke with the site supervisor, Owen, today, and Owen seemed quite happy with the level cleanup that was done. He did mention there might be a couple of small little piles that will ensure Dixon gives a once-over to finalize the cleanup. With respect to the system rebuild, the design work to rebuild the main overhead line that will run along Main Street is almost complete. The construction of the infrastructure is going to take place in multiple phases. So got a picture in the next slide showing the phased approach. But timing of those build of the phases is going to depend on a number of factors, and I'll go through a few of those factors. We had a meeting today with MatCon to discuss construction staging, so we feel we've got a really good view of how to get this overhead system rebuilt. So while there will be multiple phases, the 2 main phases of the overhead reconstruction are shown here. So in red, you'll see phase 1, which is essentially rebuilding the main overhead line north to south along Main Street. That will allow us to tie infrastructure at the north end of town and infrastructure at the south end of town, and really provide the main backbone to bring electrical service back to the village. A small portion of phase 1 will be to extend along First Street west towards Fraser, and then a couple spans of wire north to around 2nd. The idea there is to, in the first phase, try and get the infrastructure out immediately to a couple of the houses that looks like they might be ready for power sooner than others. The phase 2 works, we expect to continue along Fraser and wrap up the loop that would be the main First Street Fraser 7th loop. And then extend along 7th east towards Station Road. The completion of these 2 phases will essentially complete the main infrastructure throughout the village and allow individual service connections to come off of that main infrastructure in fairly short order. So as business and residents call for service connections, it'll be quite quick to extend whatever minimal infrastructure would be required to reach those service requests. For timelines, we are targeting start and completion of phase 1 in September, and then for phase 2, we're targeting start and completion in December. Phase 2 may happen sooner depending on the progress on phase 1 and what we learn from the heritage requirements, the construction staging, and the various requests for power that we may get at that time. So we hope to learn a lot from phase 1 and assess the progress or advancing phase 2 as needed. Actually, I'm going to stay on this slide here just for a second. So one of the points that's been discussed with MatCon on site recently was the timing of building and erecting an overhead power infrastructure while there's still a number of cleanup efforts underway with machinery driving around and a potential obstruction to the restoration or the cleanup work if the overhead power lines are erected too soon. MatCon felt that a September timeline would be aggressive for them to complete their works on Main Street in order to have it ready for us to come in and build the overhead line, but they believed at this point in time it was doable. So it does look like that's a good way to stage the work so that the overhead power lines don't inhibit the progress of the cleanup. So that was, we want to make sure that we're staging correctly and not introducing either just structural impediments to the cleanup, but also the safety aspect of having energized overhead power lines while there's still so much activity going One of the things that we early on, probably the last time I presented, we talked about is that BC Hydro was going to take whatever opportunities we could to make improvements to the system within the scope of building a like-for-like system. And so to that end, a number of the actions that we're taking are to improve the reliability and the overall power distribution to the village of Lytton. So a couple of examples here. We're going to taller poles. The obvious benefit of taller poles is that they're further away from the ground, they're further away from potential hazard. Increasing the conductor size, so we're upgrading the main conductor that would go along Main Street. That just offers a higher capacity power availability, which will eliminate the need to upgrade it in the future. That's not to say if there was a major density that was added, there could be upgrades required in the future, but this is a significant upgrade that should last for many years. And then one of the main ones being adding more reclosers to the system. Currently, there's a single recloser. We're adding a second recloser, and what these reclosers do is they do two things. They allow BC Hydro to remotely switch power in the area. So if there's a fault on the system and we want to switch to serve from power from the north end of town or south end of town, we have the ability to remotely switch. If emergency work needs to be done or repairs on the power line need to be done, it allows us to isolate just the sections that are needed instead of taking large power outages for maintenance work. And probably the most impactful thing that reclosers do is in the event of a system fault, they automatically test to see if the fault is cleared, and then they attempt to reclose the system. So an example would be when a tree branch falls on a power line and causes a fault in the system and the power goes out, often that branch falls to the ground. And so there's no longer a fault in the system. With traditional fuses, those fuses remain blown until our crews come and reset them. With a recloser, the recloser automatically recloses those fuses if the fault is cleared. It's set for a certain number of tries, and many homeowners may have experienced this where the lights flicker once or twice and then they come back on, or once, twice, a third time and they stay off. That would be a recloser attempting to reclose a circuit, and the result of if power goes back on, it's because the fault is cleared. If power stays off, it's because there was probably a more significant fault that had happened. This is a significant improvement in reliability. When those two phases that I described are complete, that's the ideal time for customers to start calling in and requesting service connections. They actually don't have to wait for phase 2 to complete before connecting to phase 1. Whichever phase is complete at the time of their call, that will determine if we're ready to connect them or not. But there is a requirement that they have an electrical contractor and an electrical permit from Technical Safety BC. And I'm not sure of the specific approvals that are required from the village in terms of occupancy and electrical energization, but whatever there was there would be required as well. There's info there on how to make a request. It's available on our website. There's a web portal to make requests, and you can also call directly into our Express Connect Center to request a service connection. As I mentioned, with having overhead energized power lines throughout the village when there's a lot of activity going on, especially with reconstruction, it's very important that everyone in the area is aware of electrical power safety. There are limits of approach and safe clearances to working around power lines, flagging requirements. There's a couple links in here, one to WorkSafe BC, one to BC Hydro's own website to provide information on safety and worker training around power lines. I think this is a very, very important thing that everyone in the community understands. With so much going on and having these erected power lines while there is so much construction going on, this is an important point that I'm going to take every opportunity to stress at every opportunity or every speaking chance I have. That's all I have for today. I'm happy to take questions, go over anything that I may have gone over a little too quickly.
So go ahead, Jennifer. do any counselors have any questions?
I have a question, Mayor. Are these going to be the standard poles as before, the wooden ones? And are they looks like they're all on the west side of the Fraser Street or west side of Main Street. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. We're going to be, wherever possible, we're going to be putting the poles back in the original pole holes.
I see. But these are not fireproof poles, they're just standard wooden poles.
They are standard wooden poles, yes.
Thank you.
Lillian?
Thank you. Derek, I'm just wondering, what was the connection fee for residents again?
I'm going off the top of my head here. I think it was $800, $800 or $900 for a connection fee. However, if the connection is in the same manner as before the fire, then BC Hydro is waiving the connection fees for residents. If they are asking for a different type of service, so for example, if they're asking us to provide an underground service from the overhead power line, or if there's a significant change to the type of building that was there, even though it's still residential, then there may be a request. But generally speaking, we're waiving connection fees for like residential service connections.
Okay, because I mean, I hope you understand that a lot of the homes are not going to be the same as they were. So if a resident is, building basically the same thing, but circumstances have altered the connection, are they going to be required to pay the fee, or would you guys be waiving that sort of as a whole?
I think our general approach will be waiving the residential service connections unless there's a red flag that comes up. So I think that'll be the general messaging is, where, unless there's something significant happening, the only thing I can really think of is somebody requested an underground service that would be significantly different than the overhead service. So that's probably where, we'd probably ask the question if it's reasonable for us to waive that. And then, for example, if someone requested in the highly unlikely event that somebody requested something like a 400 amp residential service, which I can't imagine ever happening, again, that would be one of those flags that would probably be raised, and we would require payment for that.
Okay, and the businesses, I'm trying to remember, I believe it was 1,500, is that correct?
I think it was, I had a look at it actually after, I think it was around 1,200, between 12 and 1,500, but I think it was 1,250.
Okay. And will the businesses be getting any assistance?
They will not be.
Okay. All right. And you mentioned having the completion, phase 2, finished for December, but you expect that there may be an earlier completion date for that just based on how cleanup goes?
Not so, yeah, cleanup would be one of the items. I think really it will be based on how phase 1 goes and more the planning of phase 1. So if we find that the heritage requirements, we're able to manage them quite easily, the site access, including traffic management, we're able to manage quite easily. I think that will allow us to move forward quicker with the design and implementation of phase 2. If we need to take learnings from phase 1 in order to not make mistakes in phase 2, then that might take a little bit longer.
Okay. And anyone in the phase 1 area can get connected as soon as the phase 1 is complete. So they don't have to wait for phase 2. They can start getting themselves connected and ready to go. Am I correct?
That's correct. Yeah. And that was one of the main reasons why we chose to build it like this.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation.
Through the mayor, if I may, Mr. Curl, can you please provide your contact information so the public who may have questions that weren't able to ask them at this council meeting, so they can directly ask you those questions?
Sure thing. I'll put my contact information in the chat.
Okay, thank you, Marianne. I don't think the chat is activated for participants, but I think I've made you co-host, so you might be able to add it. So
okay. If not, I'll send you an email with that information.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So our second delegation is the Community Wildfire Protection and Recovery Plan. The preliminary findings are by Sophie Goldbright and Mr. Bruce Blackwell. So the floor is yours.
Leslie, I'm going to let Bruce go first. And I'm not sure if you want me to cover the CRI proposal on point 6 of the agenda or right after this.
I would prefer that you waited till point 6, but if you're back in Ontario and you have to stay up too late.
That sounds great. So I'll leave the floor to Bruce. Thanks.
Thank you, Sophie. Good evening, everyone. My name is Bruce Blackwell. I've been retained by the Institute of Catastrophic Loss to do community wildfire protection, and I'll call it recovery plan. I've done these all over British Columbia. I've been involved in the wildfire business for about 34 years. And one of the things that the folks from ICLR asked was that we come to you with some early recommendations. Normally, we would take about 6 months to do this work, and we would come to you with a fulsome suite of recommendations at the end. But because the funding that may be available will come after the summer, we're trying to get thinking about those recommendations early in the process. So tonight, I am going to summarize what I'll call some key recommendations from our initial investigations. I believe Leslie shared with you the 33 recommendations that we've put in tabular form at this point. And I'll welcome your questions and comments at the end. And I'll try to be brief and follow through some of the observations that we've come up with. So, sorry, I've just got to share the screen first. Share. So does everybody see my my slides? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So just a couple of quick observations from the very first slide. On your left is an area that was fuel treated under previous community wildfire protection plans, and you can see that there were some trees that were scorched, but a lot of living trees in that foreground. And the reason for that is that the surface fire wasn't hot enough to move fire into the crowns. It largely moved through this area as a surface fire. And I think one of the key observations, if we look, is that much of the fire that spread into town spread as a surface fire. It didn't spread through trees. It didn't spread through forest. It spread through surface vegetation that existed largely throughout the community and off of the Fraser. And this the slide to the right, you can actually see the new grass that's growing, and that's the new fuel type that's that poses a hazard moving forward in terms of the things we need to think about in terms of better protecting the community so this doesn't happen again. I think most of the fire professionals that I work for were pretty amazed at how fire went through this town as a surface fire driven obviously by the significant wind event. And so tonight I'm going to talk to you about our plan, the field review, the draft recommendations, and open the floor for questions. So there has been a lot of fire work around Lytton. There was a 2016 community wildfire protection plan, and there have been a large number of treatments that have occurred adjacent to the community to protect the community from wildfire. There was a post-fire examination of Lytton, which provided a lot of observations. And there has been work done, which I believe has been presented to you in terms of rebuilding the community, in terms of building standards and such. And I think the main thing is there has been a lot of work. So why did Lytton still have the difficulties it had? Well, again, I want to go back to our focus in protecting communities largely has been, until recently, focused on forested parcels on Crown land adjacent to communities. And it's been well recognized, probably in the last 5 years, that we can do all kinds of work on Crown land, reducing fuels. But if we don't focus on private property, if we don't focus on managing some fuels within municipal properties, we're going to expose ourselves to continued hazards. And really, we need a more fulsome approach to protecting communities. So here you can see this is an area that survived the fire. The green grass is recovered. You can see that the trees were largely scorched. And there's good reason for that. You've got crown separation between the surface. You don't have a lot of needles, or didn't have a lot of needles. And this area was well treated. And so fire spread through here, but it didn't actually kill the vegetation because it didn't get hot enough to do so. And we have numerous examples of that. But one of the recommendations that we've made is that we need to think about irrigating these green spaces more, and private green spaces throughout the fire season, because too many of the public areas and too many private properties had dead, dying, or dried out vegetation. So this needs to be looked at in terms of a water supply review, so that we can consider increasing available water throughout the municipality. And one of the options, and we've been in touch with Dave Mitchell with the fire services review, and I think we're in agreement that there is a possibility to look at some water sources using the Fraser River to better irrigate parts of the community to reduce the overall hazard. Because no matter what's done in the future, I believe it's going to be very difficult to manage all of the grass. Grass is going to be your enemy from here into the future. And keeping it irrigated means that when we have burning embers blowing into the town, we're not going to start those surface fires that move to homes and move to municipal buildings. So you can see here, there's numerous conduits where the vegetation dried out and fire was able to move. But then when you look at the home above the slope, it's green and likely irrigated, and the fire didn't as easily move into those irrigated locations. So these slopes and scarps off the Fraser were highly, they offered ignition spread into the community and carried embers into the houses themselves. You also have lots of native grasses adjacent to the highway. And so, again, some of this has to be identified for management. This level of grass is going to carry a fairly significant fire. It may not take out the trees, but it allows ember transport. It allows fire to move through the community. So these types of areas burn like this. We still had movement of fire through here. And so we've got to limit these conduits of fire either through spring burning, mowing, or cleaning up some of the dead needles that have been here. There's going to have to be a commitment to a greater degree of maintenance on public lands, particularly right within the community. Here again, you can see the grass developing back. You can see we could walk through the community today, and there's numerous examples where the grass is coming back. It's going to dry out during the fire season, and again, it's going to propagate fire. Another example, this is unburned grass by the school. And here you can see the needle buildup. So where you have ponderosa pine, you're going to get these large needle buildups in the absence of fire. These were fire-dominated ecosystems historically, and unless these kinds of accumulations are managed, they're going to propagate more fire spread. And they can't just be managed on Crown land. They have to be managed on municipal land, and they have to be managed on private land. Again, another example, this is Ski Provincial Park, but you can see the fire came up and largely stopped at the top of the scarp because it was irrigated, and it was vegetation that reduced fire intensity. Again, you can see the needles that are already here after the fire, and a lot of these dead trees are going to contribute significant foliage to the ground. So I think ideally, there needs to be a concerted effort to work progressively every year to try to manage these green spaces. Obviously, April is the target for annual cleanup. And like we've done with Firesmart and other communities, there needs to be incentives for residents to do these cleanups on their own property and as neighborhood events. A lot of communities have done things like provide food, tools, trucks, and bins to assist in this cleanup effort. And you can consider school groups or other volunteers or students. But obviously, all of the municipal green spaces need to be regularly mowed, and that includes ditches, banks, and parks. And when I say regularly mowed, I'm talking about at the front end of the fire season. And grasses need to be kept at 10 centimeters. I don't think that was the case looking at a lot of these photos working through the community. And grass and needle management needs to be combined with a prescribed burning program in the spring and fall. And I believe that BC Wildfire Service is going to put an effort into doing that. Obviously, there were a number of places where critical infrastructure that supported the community and would have supported the recovery of the community burned in this event. Many communities throughout BC, after the Fort McMurray fire, realized that critical infrastructure was vulnerable, and many of them have undertaken to assess all of their critical infrastructure and harden it off from fire. There were several public works and community government buildings that burned. Again, either they weren't constructed from Firesmart materials, or there was vegetation that allowed an ignition in close proximity, and that critical infrastructure burned. In this rebuild, it's critical that this infrastructure meets Firesmart standards, both from the materials that it's built from and the landscaping that's put around it. I think another key thing is you lost electrical power during the fire. Backup generation, obviously important, and any business that provides critical services like gas stations and grocery stores should follow these same recommendations. Here you can see
through the mayor, Mr. Blackwell and council, just to let you know, you've almost exceeded the 10-minute presentation delegation timeline. However, considering the subject matter, I would like to propose to council that they waive the proceedings rules, so you can continue your presentation to the end.
Apologies,
and that needs it.
I've got 7 slides left. I tried to shorten it, but anyway,
yeah,
here's a couple of examples of buildings burnt. This would
Mr. Blackwell, I'm just requesting a vote from council so they can extend your presentation time till the conclusion of your presentation. So by unanimous vote is what we're required here from the meeting procedure bylaw.
Councillor Hay also move that we extend his time for the presentation.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you all. So sorry for the interruption.
Thank you. Here's an example of one of the public works building. Metal roof, great. Cinder block construction, but you see that there is combustible wood material on the siding. That's how this structure would have burned in the fire. Again, another public work building, largely cinder block, but still a lot of damage because there were vulnerable parts of the structure. Key thing in rebuilding this critical infrastructure is it meets Firesmart standards. So the other thing is, I know you've been working on a bylaw. We need to encourage this bylaw to be followed as much as possible in terms of the rebuild. So whatever's required to make it easy for residents who are rebuilding to comply with the new building bylaw, we need to make every effort to do that. Compliance can be addressed through provisions of information, some guides, in-person and virtual presentations and workshops, media releases, meaningful enforcement. There's going to have to be some enforcement. I can tell you that I'm trying to implement development permit areas all over British Columbia, and builders and developers are always looking to use new materials, new ways of doing things that aren't necessarily always meeting the kind of code and material resistance that we want. So you have to manage some of this construction, and I think it's going to be an important part in the review of approving new structures when they're built. And ideally, the other thing is providing education around landscaping, Firesmart landscaping. Don't allow cedar hedging, juniper, coniferous vegetation that can burn again. We want succulent plants being approved. We want them located 10 meters away from the building if possible. And you really want to force that Firesmart compliance, because much of the house-to-house losses were vegetation on those private properties, allowing movement of fire to the next property, to the next property. And so we had multiple ignitions based on the vegetation of private properties that weren't fire smart. Obviously, there are several large private land holdings where there is a fire threat. They're not being managed. There needs to be work to treat those areas consistent with the other areas in the community. We've identified some of those, and ideally, the municipality, the province needs to work with those private landowners to achieve a meaningful treatment standard. And here's one example. This is the east side of Highway 1 south of town, and there's a clear line between the private unmanaged area and the Schwab First Nations land. You can see the division here. We can't have this discontinuity. We need it all treated. And so we've got to work with private landowners. Otherwise, we're not going to achieve a safe community standard the way we're all thinking we should be. Obviously, continue to participate in the Firesmart committee work, the roundtable work. I'll try to speed up here. Members of the Lytton Fire Department have to become certified firefighters, trained to the OFC exterior standard. It's my understanding they weren't prior to the fire, so there's more work to be done with the fire service. So I tried to expedite that a little bit. I didn't give you all the detail. I believe the recommendations in draft form have been circulated to everybody, and I welcome your questions and comments.
Does council have any questions?
That was quite overwhelming, actually. I'm sure we'll have some questions as the time goes on.
I have a question for Mr. Blackwell. At first reading, we have a bylaw 711 to deal with these issues. Have you had a chance to look at it?
They were shared to me a couple of months ago, and I'm supportive of those recommendations.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. So we are now on to item 4, public comment.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Law. I'm just going to remove these delegates just so we can make some space on our screen here. Okay, so members of the public, if you are interested in submitting a comment to council, please use the raise hand function here in this meeting. I see we already have one hand up. Once we call upon your name, we'll be asking you to state your name, your address, and the item number on the agenda that you'd like to speak to, and you'll have up to 2 minutes to provide your comment to council. So we do have one request already, and I believe that's from Mr. Ernie Wagner. So I'm going to ask you to unmute now, and you may speak.
Yes, this is Ernie Wagner. Good evening, Mayor and Council. And I'm going to speak on 711 again. I see that the request is for you to take it to the second reading with no revisions at all. So I've read the Firesmart report on Lytton, and the reason the fire went through Lytton so quickly, and it was mainly the dry grass and debris, and after that, the wooden house to wooden house structures. There was no mention of propane tanks whatsoever. That wasn't a cause. There was no mention of RVs being the cause of the fire spread. There was no mention of firewood stacks being like increasing the speed of the fire. And the recommendations at the end was that you keep combustible material 5 feet from the house instead of 33 feet like 711 says. The recommendation was that people would have green lawn, flowers, and garden around their house, not gravel and cement. So I think with the houses being built with fireproof materials, the mandatory law that you keep your premises free of grass, dry grass, I think 7-Eleven is way too restrictive. You should be allowed RVs, wood stoves, auxiliary propane stoves for when the electricity goes out so often. So I don't think it should be put in the way it is. It should be a lot of revisions. And at the last agenda, there was 20 pages, 186 comments from the residents that were not happy with this bylaw. And some of them were almost pleading the council not put the bylaw through the way it is. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. The next speaker we have on the list is Ms. Denise O'Connor. So Denise, you can state your name, address, and the item number on the agenda you'd like to speak to.
Hi, it's Denise O'Connor here of 522 Fraser Street. I'd like to speak to item number 8.2, which is the building bylaw 711. So I believe it was in early February that the council, at the council meeting, when we were asked to provide feedback on the newly introduced bylaw 711. During the months since then, bylaw 711 has been brought up and talked about at various Zoom meetings. At these meetings, I heard that although council would have the final say, it was likely that bylaw 711 would have parts go into a zoning bylaw or into the official community plan. But here it is June, and the bylaw is being put forward for second reading in the same form as it was first presented. Right. So maybe I've missed something, but the only time I can find that our comments were addressed was by the ICLR at the April 28th community meeting. But even at that meeting, we were told that the bylaw would probably take a somewhat different form. So yesterday, I met with a building designer with hopes of starting to talk about plans for rebuilding my own home. And she had questions about the bylaw 711. And so what a new footprint might look like under the bylaw, considering the shape and size of our lot. And she told us that right now we'd be wasting our time trying to go ahead with further planning until the bylaws are in place. Tonight, the bylaw goes into second reading. So I hope that you share with us tonight a timeline for third and fourth readings and how further consultation, not information sharing, but plan discussion and dialogue is going to fit into that timeline. Thank you. Thank you, Denise.
The next speaker we have on the list is Ms. Jennifer Thoss. So Jennifer, please state your name, your address, and the item number on the agenda you're wishing to speak to.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am a homeowner at 224 Fraser Street. I would like to go on record echoing Ernie Wagner's sentiments regarding the bylaw being read prematurely into the second reading and how restrictive it is in terms of barbecues, RVs, wood stoves, auxiliary propane stoves. I enjoyed the lifestyle of having a fire in my backyard in the winter. I'm not sure if that's part of the plan. Judging by the last presentation by the delegation. I was happy to see that irrigation was addressed, as my personal experience has been that areas of the village that were well irrigated survived, even cedar trees in areas that were well irrigated. I have a lot of firsthand experience to that effect. So irrigation and water supply is a huge concern. Yeah, I also do think we need to have more dialogue with residents. I do feel that some of the town hall meetings have been information sessions rather than consultation. And I feel like there's a lot of lobbyists with a hand in that. I also am struggling with trying to plan for a rebuild. I have looked at several housing plans and find it impossible to move forward without a bylaw in place. However, with the current bylaw, I don't think it's acceptable. And judging by pages 144 to 160 or what have you in the last package, or a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of meetings ago, pardon me, I didn't see any comments in favor of this bylaw. So I wonder why we're moving forward with it. But I would like to see something expedited as soon as possible. And on a final note, I see that our tax notices are coming due. I know I'm out of time. Our tax notices are coming due. I have not received that in the mail thus far. And I realize that mail is getting stuck in transit, but I assume there's other residents with that same predicament. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jennifer. If there are any other comments in the public, now is the time to raise your hand. Otherwise, we will move forward in the, we do have one last one here. Just so Lightfoot, please state your name, address, and the item number on the agenda you'd like to speak to.
Good evening, Jesua Lightfoot, South Spencer Road. I would like to talk to 7.1 temporary office staff report dated April the 14th, but not shared until just several days ago. And I have to say I was really disappointed that the existing mill office was not considered as a temporary office. And many people want to know why. For over 10 months, the mill has been viewed as a quick, functional possibility for a temporary office. A council motion was even made in early fall to consider that possibility. And after a review was done and a report produced, I believe that would seem that certain improvements required were shared, as throughout the winter, the building was worked on. Interior painting was completed, replacement of washroom fixtures, and an exterior ramp. I think that was all done in anticipation of occupancy. The keys were ready to hand over on February the 7th. We've seen several reports, and we're all wondering how much time has been directed to this issue when 4 months ago a functional office was available. Are there not higher priority issues that need this attention? Points for Aspen Planer's old mill office that were presented incorrectly maybe in the report is it is not south of the village of Lytton. It is within the village boundaries. The costs for the existing mill office would be negligible. You might want to take the $26,000 contingency that you have in the other options and just use that for minor improvements. But outside of a monthly lease agreement, it would be way less costly. And it would be green. We would be reusing something. It would be a low carbon footprint. We wouldn't be burning oil and hauling in new materials to create something when it is temporary. We need to realize it's just temporary. So the biggest benefit, and the one that people have been crying for, is that it could be immediately occupied. Within a week, you could have Wi-Fi and you could have a functioning office. There is an opportunity for agency and staff workplace planning, repository for applications, ongoing village functions. It could be a war room detailing plans and progress. And as building is starting,
okay, Jesua, you've reached your 2 minutes here. So thank you for that.
If I can just finish off, the fact that this wasn't given enough time for opportunity to apply as a delegation makes it difficult. But I would like to suggest that the village have another new option they considered tonight, that the village enter into a 2-year lease agreement for the existing mill office with Aspen Planers. As they are also negotiating with Aspen Planers for interim housing, it would seem they do have a relationship they could build on. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesua. Okay, so we're going to go back to the agenda. There are no other requests for speakers, so I'm going to hand the duties back over to the mayor, and thank you.
Thank you. We're on to item 5, adoption of minutes, the regular council meeting for the 11th of May. Are there any corrections? Councillor Hay.
Page 10, pardon me, of 165. Paragraph 10.2, Councillor Hayes' report.
Sorry, Councillor Hay, which minutes are you talking about?
That's the May 11th regular council meeting.
Yeah, page 10 of 165. It's under my report. Okay. So it says Councillor Hay noted his conversation with the residents regarding thanks for Collier. It wasn't. It was thanks for Owen Collins for taking them in. I know I'm humble.
Are there any other corrections?
Yeah. Next page, page 11. Paragraph 11, reports from committees to council. Under 1A, said Councillor Hay reported the donation card handout process is underway and there are still days. I believe that time I mentioned we were there the 3rd, 17th, and 31 May at the Resiliency Center to do that. Okay.
Sorry, do you want me to add the dates that you mentioned in your report to that? I still don't have it in front of me, so I'm just wondering what the correction is.
Sorry. It said, and there are still days where they will be provided. At that report, I mentioned the 3rd of May, 17th of May, and the 31st of May at the Resiliency Center. From where it would be. Okay. If I'm wrong and you get the recording, just better my recall at my age.
Sorry, I was just making generalizations and not specific dates, but I can make specific dates in the future notes. Okay.
And the last one I got on this one, no, sorry, this page is under motion 22-360. And I believe I'm correct in this. The council canceled the May 25th, 2022 regular council meeting due to, and it's in their lack of quorum, and it wasn't all councilors were present during that time, it was staff was away.
Okay.
And thank you, that's all of the 11th.
Excuse me.
So could I get a motion to accept the regular council meeting minutes as amended?
I'll motion.
Councillor Hayes, second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We are now going on to the special council meeting for the 31st of May.
Just through the mayor, we have on the agenda just one resolution to adopt all 3 sets of minutes in one go. So if there is no other amendments for the other minutes, then we can just accept that all of the minutes have been adopted pending those amendments from Councillor Hay. So just reading through the agenda, it's just we try to compartmentalize those motions so we can save time because we've got a very busy meeting.
Okay. So are there any corrections to the May 31st minutes? Hearing none, I guess all in favor of
Aye.
There we go.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
There we go. So we're on to business arising, from the minutes. 6.1. Sophie is going to speak to this.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. Is it possible to very quickly share my screen?
Thank you. I just made you co-host.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to be brief. I know you have a busy evening tonight. So again, I've met many of you before. I'm Sophie Gable with the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction. We have worked alongside some of the staff of the village in the past couple months to help with the development of the proposed building bylaw 711. We've also funded the development of the Community Welfare Protection and Recovery Plan that Bruce just presented. And the third thing that we really want to help with is really to support community members and council during implementation. So answering questions, which we did back in April, we're happy to do again as needed, and also securing funding for the implementations, which is what I'm going to touch on a bit more tonight. So in an effort to fund some of the recommendations that were presented by Bruce just a few minutes ago, and we worked with the village to prepare a proposal to the Union of BC Municipalities under the Community Resiliency Investment Program, which is intended to reduce the risk of wildfire and mitigate impacts on BC communities. The program was just reviewed recently. In the past, you could apply for $150,000 for 1 year, but it was just changed. So you are now entitled to apply for $300,000 over a 2-year period to implement various wildfire risk reduction actions at the community level. So pretty much if awarded, the funds would be used to support the key recommendations that were presented earlier by Bruce. And it could also go, if adopted, to fund some of the additional costs associated with proposed bylaw 711. So very quickly, I want to give you an overview of how we so far spread the funds that we requested. So the biggest chunk of the budget would go towards hiring someone who has experience with these type of initiatives that could really manage the different education, interagency cooperation, Firesmart training and cross-training. So someone that really would oversee all of the other activities, which we've also allocated budget for. So we've budgeted $214,000 over 2 years, which includes, benefits on top of the salary. An important part of it is also education activities. So an education campaign, Wildfire Resilience Day, as Bruce touched on earlier, preparing guides to really help with the adoption of some of the measures if bylaw 711 is approved and in whichever form. Creation of a landscaping guide. I know there have been many questions in the past as to which type of plants can be used and things like that. So all these educational and guides that could be helpful for residents. Also allocated budget for Firesmart training and cross trainings, both for local representatives and members of the fire department. An important chunk of the budget as well, $88,000, could go towards mowing all municipal green spaces and the disposal of conifer needles, which was highlighted also earlier as a very high priority. And I believe if this amount is not fully needed for that task, it could be allocated towards more irrigation as well. In addition, finally, the Firesmart activities for residential areas. So out of this $30,000, we allocated $20,000 for the Firesmart homeowner rebate program. So what that would mean is that homeowners, we've budgeted for 2 years, 10 homeowners per year, which is, kind of a guess of the rebuild, but that could be adjusted. And homeowners could apply to get $1,000 to do things like, fire resistant pavement materials on their homes. So anything for construction materials, but also plants that are identified by Firesmart as being appropriate for the geographic area where Lytton is. So overall, we are requesting slightly above what the limit is, and we've been encouraged to do so by various people. So I just want to keep you posted on what type of actions were included if the funding becomes available through this program. Applications are being taken on a rolling basis. So once we have your approval and there's a few additional administrative steps to take, then we would be happy to help the village submit that to UBCM to secure some funding for risk reduction actions, both at the household level, but also at the broader community level. So that's all I had for tonight.
So do you need a motion to approve the grant funding request?
I think so, yeah.
Yes, she does.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to, with UBCM grant applications, you have to provide a resolution.
I'll make that motion.
So moved.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion?
And just double checking, Ms. Gilbert, I don't remember if usually UBCM requires you to say that you support, the council supports a grant application for such and such dollars under the program that we're applying for, and that they will do the overall management of the grant. Is that one of the requirements still?
I believe we need council support for the proposal as it is presented, yeah. So
yeah, okay.
I'm happy to share the screen with the amount again, if that can be helpful.
Yes.
1 second.
Okay.
So it's this amount at the very bottom.
$360,850.
Okay.
The slide before the funding was only 3.
Yes, but they can apply for more.
Yeah, they can apply for more.
Okay, so is there any further discussion on this, grant funding request?
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
If we wanted to get our firefighters trained up to a higher level, would the cost for the training fall under something like this, or would we look elsewhere for funding on that?
Yeah, I believe we've already included in the budget training in partnership with BC Wildfire Services. If we want a higher level of training, we could, increase that portion of the budget and reduce something elsewhere, but that's very possible. Yeah.
Okay, super. Thank you, Sophie.
Also, I should mention that within the different categories, we've allocated a budget, but if you were to find out over time that you need slightly less for an action, you could transfer it to another element within that category. So there is some flexibility overall in that, how that will be applied.
Are there any other questions? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, that's passed.
Thank you.
So we are now on to staff reports. Oh, sorry, pardon?
He's got three.
Two late items. Councillor Hay.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Appreciate it. First one I want to talk on is on page 11 of 165. Number 14. So at the bottom of the page. I checked after reading this, I checked the minutes and there was nothing for a report on tonight. So I was wondering if Mr. Matucci was going to be able to give us a report, or if the meeting between, as it says, let the Director of Recovery, Ron Matucci, speak to Noni McCann regarding the planning of an event for June 30th, 2022, anniversary date of the Lytton Creek fire. I was just wondering if anything has been done on that.
I believe Mr. Matucci has been at a meeting just yesterday, I believe it was, or the day before.
Okay.
With the group that's putting this stuff on. I think what people might need to know is whether council is supporting the event in the sense that.
Thank you.
Mr. Matucci on? Oh, there you are.
Thank you, Leslie. I was having trouble switching between my my microphone and my speakers here, so I think I got the gist of it. Yeah, I just actually was in touch with Edith Luonga to talk about what exactly could the village or would the village do. The day's been pretty well planned out with a number of groups already. I know within the community, people like Noni McCann, I think some in the audience, are active. There's one group, but there's a number of active people. So the real question, is what is the role that the village wants to take within it? Certainly, the group is asking for donations, and I know both have worked through the province, and I know, Mr. Hay and a lot of the contractors will be donating as contractors to the event. So it's really a question of what the village itself, as the village, certainly people within the village are participating as the broader community, but whether the entity of the village itself would like to contribute in some way or another.
Councillor Hay?
Mr. Tucci, sorry, what I guess I was after were some details, like where's the event going to be held, what timings, et cetera, like that. So I think we've always had a problem with communication. This is one of the best stages for us to pass that out at.
Yeah,
I don't
no.
mean to catch you off guard.
Yeah, that's right, Councillor. I don't have it with me now, but certainly the whole day is pretty much planned out. I think the committee's has had a series of meetings. I couldn't attend the one yesterday because I was at another meeting, but there is a whole series of events. It'd be hard for me to advertise what the committee's actually doing, but we do have the information. I could certainly forward it through Leslie to council as to what's been planned to date. Again, there's a number of things happening throughout the community, both within the school district and as well as some community events. Some are private, trying to be more private. Some are more public. Some are more celebratory. I think the committees really have to grapple with the nature of the day. And there are many views within the community. During my attendance at the meeting, there are many views in the community as how it should be done. There's a time capsule, and there's an event. There's some aspects of the event will be filmed. They're being filmed as part of almost like a documentary. So I can provide the information to council that shows what is actually being planned for the day.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. I did not mean to catch you off guard.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I didn't attend the meeting yesterday, so I wouldn't be able to report on exactly what was discussed yesterday.
So would a member of council like to make a motion as to what they would like to contribute towards this event?
Has there been any requests from Noni or from other members for anything?
There's a budget, and they're seeking donations. I know they were short last time, but I also know there's a couple of sizable donations that came in. So my suggestion would be, if you could, then just pass a motion to ask how the village could help. Certainly the day's being planned. It's not as if they need ideas of what to do. I think at this point in time, it's more about trying to raise the funds for things like the barbecue and the events that they're going to have planned.
I'll make a motion that Mr. Matusi contact the, I gather Noni is spearheading it. And
actually Edith is, but they're all
okay.
on the committee, right?
Okay, contact the top person and see if there's how the village can assist and bring the information back to us. And we can, I would suggest we do it maybe for a special meeting just because of the timeline.
Great. Okay.
I'll second that motion.
Second motion.
Okay, so we got two seconders.
Oh, good. Sorry.
Councillor Urquhart also made the motion.
You can have it.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So you're now finished?
No, I have one more.
Okay, Councillor Hay?
I have one more. Sorry, the last one I had under a late item is on page 14 of 165. That's from a special meeting. And Mr. High, this will probably be directed to you if that is all right. I remember I spoke on paragraph 2 on there where it says a portion of the 18.3 million of the provincial funding can be repurposed for the debris removal remediation, which is based on time/cost using the proposed MOU framework. I'm 100% behind the MOU, do not get me wrong. But I think the figure was mentioned, it could be up to 3 million or higher, and I'm just wondering where that repurposed money is coming from.
Yeah, Councillor. So it really is going to be a decision of the village. We would identify areas within that budget that we believe we could repurpose or move forward in the project to cover the insured or the underinsured folks through that gap. But it would come from that $18.4 million grant is what we proposed at this point in time. We would rely on the CFO then to take that request through to the funding partners and get approval to repurpose the money for that intended purpose.
I guess my concern is, sorry, I voiced this at that meeting, was 18.3 only goes so far, and if we're repurposing something, $3 million that's already been purposed to something's going to suffer, and if it gets away, and that's sort of, I think I may mention the other one, and I don't mean to be putting you on the spot, but a clear-cut contract with these people so we knew where our money was going would be greatly taken in by me anyway. I'd like to know where we are, because we've got one pot of money and we've got 5 organizations think they own the whole thing. You know, it's going to be, you know, I'm getting too old to do the fishes and the loaves.
So we do have those clear-cut contracts for the work that we put it into their scope at this point in time. We do not know that the residents of Lytton who are underinsured, working with their insurers, are going to sign on to this approach with us. So we don't know how many properties that we have to do the work. So we have not provided that additional scope of work through to our archaeologist, our environmental consultants, or our contractor. So I provided a estimate based on the current rates and unit rates that we are seeing in the village, reduced the value that we believe would go into the trust from the private residents insurance policies. And that's where we determined what the gap potentially could be. So at this point, Councillor, it is an estimate based on what we're seeing on site. That estimate would have to be validated, as you say, through quotes from our contractors when we propose a scope increase to their work for that. The process won't be labor intensive, but at this point in time, until we know how many properties or that we have the sign on from all residents, then there is no additional scope of work. So right now we're working through the approvals and trying to get people to buy into this approach. The council meeting on Tuesday was really one of the big levers to do that. We have another meeting with the insurers on Friday, which we are hoping will be the second lever to push this approach further to get people to buy into it.
Super, thanks very much. My big concern is I don't want to go downtown one day and see nobody working because we ran out of money and we still got half the town to do. But then I
agree. I think it is a risk management approach. I completely appreciate there is risk associated with the decisions we make. We just have to prioritize where we want to spend that money. And I think what we're saying is we want to support the residents as early as possible to get the cleanup done. There are elements that are identified in that budget that would occur later in the project, potentially even in 2023. And so perhaps there would be an opportunity if we can't complete all of that scope within the original budget to find more funding for some of those less crucial items.
Councillor Gray.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So I had just a quick question for James. What's the time frame that we're looking at for the remediation?
Well, currently we have a contract for the uninsured properties, approximately 90 of them in the village, with an end of September completion date. And that's still what we're targeting. As Derek Curl from BC Hydro said, it's ambitious at this point, but we're still targeting it. We still think it's doable. There will be a schedule extension if we get 60 more properties added to that list, which is the number of insured or underinsured properties that we see in the village. So there could be, based on the, my estimates, it could be 2 to 3 months additional effort to do the remainder of that work.
Okay, so roughly we're looking somewhere around November or December. Now, we know that there's additional funding coming to us soon, I really hope, from that large amount of money from the federal government. So would we be able to look at that and say, we know that there's money coming and we can take it from that funding instead of the 18, which we're sort of stretching to fit everything else?
I think this is just my opinion from a strategy point of view. We have the 18.3 in hand. We want to get the remediation and debris cleanup done as quick as possible. If we can use that money to mobilize our resources, we can get the cleanup done quicker and move people back into the village quicker. We can then use any of these other grants and other funds that we're applying for, which we are actively going after, to supplement some of the work that's less crucial at the back end of the plan that we have in place that we're funded for. So Lillian, I think that might be the question you asked, but yes, I think we would then rely on additional grant monies to do other less crucial items later in the project.
Okay, super, thank you.
Mr. Matuzzi?
Yeah, thank you. And just to, back up James on, when the 18.4 was allocated for debris removal, at that point in time, we still didn't have final cost nailed down, nor the fact that the underinsured would be done to the certain level that it is. So we ended up with a lot more work and a lot more money that will have to be paid out, and the 18.4 was already allocated. And so, certainly the provincial government will have to allocate more money. They've committed to clean up, they've committed to pay for the heritage permits, they've committed to pay the plan. So although the money isn't in our bank account, certainly the commitment's there. And up till now, it hasn't been, we haven't pressed any alarm bells because, of course, people still haven't committed their ability to enter the site. As James has said, we're trying to work the crew we have just to keep up with the work we have, because we don't have enough work at this point in time, but we know it's going to come eventually in a flood. On the federal money, one of the problems we have, and I know this creates great confusion when announcements are made, but just from my experience, and I don't know, but when the government announces 500 million or 400 million, the devil's in the details, and very, very often that money is allocated for very, very specific things. The money may be allocated for housing. The money may be allocated through existing programs. You've all heard the case of after a budget when they say, well, it's really not new money here. What they've done is reallocated money from this program to this program. So some of that money may go to small business through community futures, some kind of a grant or something in an existing program. So I think we have to be really careful when we see those numbers, that until we actually know it's money that could be allocated for something we actually need and we can actually get the money, as opposed to applying to a program and maybe getting the money, I wouldn't want to raise false hopes. So lots of big numbers thrown out and it looks really good, but the devil is in the details. And until we actually see the program, whether or not that money could be reallocated to something else, we really won't know. What we know right now is we have 18.4 million that's allocated to debris cleanup, and we'll need more, and the province knows we'll need more, and it's just a matter of how we get it and when we get it.
Thank you. So do we have a motion that we're okay? Thank you. So then we are on to staff reports. So our Chief Administrative Officer, we are 7.1 is the Village of Lytton's temporary office site option analysis.
So I'm going to actually ask Mr. Hyde to speak to this report, taking into consideration the comments that were made earlier by citizens. This has been a process. I'm not sure what information citizens are holding, but it's certainly not the same information we have as far as moving into a building tomorrow. That's actually not in the case at this point. And so I'll turn it over to Mr. Hyde.
Sure. Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Leslie. Yeah, so just want to talk about a report that we did, and maybe I'll preface it to Leslie's point. And I did hear earlier questions about the Aspen Planers current facility that is on site that they have done some work to with the idea that the village would be able to use it. This wasn't an assessment of that site or a reassessment of that site. We are aware of that site. So this is simply a site options analysis for a modular unit, a modular solution that would come in and be a temporary village office. Certainly, it does not negate that we are still trying to enter into an agreement for a lease and have access to that site at Aspen Planers. We would very much like to use both options for the village. So with that, we did look at a number of sites around the village that had access to, well, access first. So some sites that were relatively flat and usable that had access to hopefully city services, sewer and water, as well as power. And so looking at maps and doing ground truthing and talking to some of the locals, we did look at 3 primary options. Obviously, the third option has a couple of locations that could be looked at. So the first option is the site above Highway 1, right beside the current cemetery. This site I know has been investigated by the municipality in the past for essential services and other development for a good reason. It is a good site. It's got good presence. It's got reasonable access. It does have access to city services just off of the top end of Loring Way and down near the Trans-Canada Highway. And it also has access to power. Getting a modular unit into the site could be challenging. We would need to get permits from MOTI for some road closures and probably develop a small letdown onto the highway so we could back a trailer into there to lift it off, or to decommission the power lines for a set period of time while we craned a unit into there. But all of them are not prohibitive. The site is owned by the municipality. It is municipal land. So that was option number 1. I'll go down to some of the financial implications of it at the table at the end. The second site that we looked at was the school itself. We know that the school and the board have been very supportive of Lytton in supporting us through the recovery, through the resiliency center and access to services. The play field at the back obviously is a flat site that is close to services that from a purely academic point of view could serve as a village office. It could serve as multiple temporary facilities for the village as we go into the rebuild. So we looked at it for that reason, understanding that from a practical perspective, it may not work out well, but we wanted to do the academic exercise of looking at the cost of servicing and access of servicing and the functionality of the site. So it also has access to services. It's got water nearby. It's got sewer down near the west side of the building. Access is poor. And obviously it would detract from the quality of education and opportunities for the students out at that field. It does look like there's a cement pad that could have been used as a tennis or some other basketball court in the past that seems to not been used. It obviously would be an easy area to just let down a trailer and build it up and add services to it. The third site was the Aspen Planers site, which we've walked and looked at numerous times for obviously the current facilities that are there, the other facilities that are on site, the access to power, obviously, as well as larger site for future uses for housing, temporary housing, public works, fire department. So we've looked at it for multiple reasons, but in this situation, it was for a temporary village office. The first site is in proximity to where the current or old office, the Woodlands office would have been located. It's about an acre in size of flat land right in that area. There is power to both buildings. We understand that there is some sort of a septic system that goes back to that, and there is non-potable water on site for that. So potable water would have to be addressed. We didn't really address it through this report. And the third one would have been further, which would have been a gravel, which we're calling the gravel pit, but it's a secondary access slightly further south at Aspen Planers, large cleared area that has had industrial disturbance in the past. So it wouldn't be greenfield. It would probably be fairly easy for us to go in there and grade a flat site, make some utility out of the space, and also provide a secondary access or egress to the site. We did look at some of well, before I get into the costing, are there any questions on the specifics of the sites or the locations themselves? Okay. So we did look at costing. Costing, again, I'll just preface this, these are estimates. We don't have hard quotes, but we did talk to some of the work crews that are in town. We also looked at some unit rates, and we did comparables on some other projects that are occurring in the province for, you know, cost per lineal feet and things like that. So there is going to be a margin of these being estimates. So I would say order of magnitude, so probably in the plus minus 30 to 40% range. As you can see through the table that was provided, option one, which is the vacant lot next to the municipal cemetery, somewhere in that $240,000 to $250,000 as an order of magnitude cost. Really, there is a limited amount of distance between the water down or the water up on Loring Way at the end of the subdivision and the sewer down by the highway. Same with power. I think one of the bigger costs would be developing the site, getting access to the site so it's not coming off the highway, which is sort of a informal access to the site right now. There is other opportunities there with some private land that is adjacent to it that we could look at in the future to create easier access and more usability to the site. So all in all, fairly cost-efficient site if we could repurpose that and use it. One of the other nice things about this site is it's owned by the municipality. So if we put the money into the infrastructure and we develop the site, the site would be in the village in perpetuity, and it could be repurposed to be used for other facilities, or when the full-time village office does get built, it could be opened up to other community groups or other services within the community. Option number two at the school, a little bit more costly. It is a further extension to get services. There'd be a lot more digging to get to the sewer. We weren't 100% sure on the water. There is some water that provides out to the school fields. We're not sure if we'd be able to tap into that or not, but that is kind of almost adjacent to that concrete area. Aspen 3, the planer site, again, both options would be comparable in price. The only difference is kind of the distance from water source and the amount of work that we need to be put into a septic or some sort of a catchment field. Whatever it may be, it would have to comply with interior health regulations. So that would need to be determined at that point in time. But seeing that all costs are relatively close to each other, we certainly think that for the items mentioned before, the ownership by the municipality, the opportunity to repurpose the site once it has services, our preferred option or a recommended option to council. If we could obtain a modular facility and the funding to prep a site like this and get it serviced would be option one, would be the location adjacent to the municipal cemetery.
James, my comment about the cemetery is in past dealings, we've been told by highways that an access off the highway is not in the cards.
Yeah, so we theorize that we'd come off Loring Way. There is a small letdown off of there. It is steep. It could be used. I'm sure we could find if we put the building back closer to the cemetery, you could come in from the south end and have parking at that end to some degree. It's not ideal. And so that's why I mentioned the private properties that are adjacent to that may be looked at by the municipality to create safer and better access. But coming off Loring Way, I think would be an appropriate solution for the village office. And I won't speak to future uses from that side access or access onto the highway.
Thank you. Does any councillor have any questions? Councillor Hay?
Thank you. James, I don't want to seem confrontational, okay? You're seeing the problem from altogether different eyes than the residents are. And you're doing a good job what you want. What we have for a village office now is a cabin in Boston Bar. Okay, that's what we've got. We don't have one here anymore, but Sam and I are working in a room. Okay, so we don't need the Empire State Building. We just need a place where the 2 or 3 people can work and where our residents can go in. And one thing, and I just throw this out for what it is if we're going to put interim housing at Aspen Planers, the village office should be there too. We have a lot of elderly people that don't drive and would like to walk there to see people, and to get them going way up the highway is a thing. Before your time here, before your time, I had made the suggestion that they got a office type trailer with a kitchen in the back of it and stuck it in the Pines Motel and their big dirt that's there. And everybody could stay in the Pines Hotel room and shower, shave, and whatever they wanted to do for about $110 a night. And then all of a sudden this thing's blown into it, gonna cost. The money is my big panic, and I let you know this because if we run out, we're in a world of hurt. And so those are the things taken into consideration as the people. I appreciate the professionalism from you, but people have been hearing plans going forever and our people still aren't seeing action. I put a motion on the table here on the 22nd of September to move staff from Kamloops to Lytton. And I thought I was being a nice guy and gave that 7 days. And it's over 7 months since. I also say this, that when I used to go downtown at the site just before you go under the underpass, I used to call Tony from on-side and the young guy from the province was there, Tim, the Walmart greeters, because there was not a friendly face to meet a resident of Lytton coming to town. Nobody. I bumped into a couple people I hadn't known that were residents there, and they were just glad to see somebody. So that's sort of trying to give a perspective, if I can, from the residents, okay? And they're not asking for miracles. They're just asking for a place where people come into town, they can meet, like Owen. Looked after the residents, came in, took them up, their house looked after. People feel, they feel that good inside. Not having it, right, well, it's gonna be next week, but we're looking at this place and that place. It just takes way too much time. And I'm not putting that on your shoulders because of professionalism. I think it's a combination of everything. And if we can look at this whole thing from a good perspective, taking everybody into account, maybe we do good. And my other fastball deal, Bud's got to have a fastball. Have we got permission from School District 74 to dig all of the ground up?
We have not. No, we felt that location wasn't a suitable location based on other factors.
That's super duper. Thanks very much for your time, and thank you for the work you're doing on it. Appreciate it.
And thank you for the context.
I'll just comment that when you're required to do a business case analysis, you look at all different options. And I thought that this actually was a good report from that perspective, whether it's something that council does agree with or go with. It is a business case analysis, and we are required as staff and professionals to do it that way. Okay.
CFO House.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think I just wanted to just give some context as well in terms of the modular option in terms of this site, is that we're not looking simply to provide a space for 2 clerks, but also for council meetings and our new CAO and the other staff that we're looking to be hiring as part of the going forward in recovery. So not to be criticizing your comment, I'm just trying to give you some context of our thinking. So that's what I'd like to say about that.
Councillor Urquhart?
Yeah, so where is the money coming for this? 240,000, is that coming right out of our budget, or is that provincial monies, or how is that going to impact our budget?
Right at this point, potentially it would come through provincial grants, but we have other options that we've been reviewing, and we will be bringing to council.
So really, this is grant money, and it won't really impact the operation of the village otherwise. It's not like it's going to be repurposed for something else, in other words.
It could be potentially, but at this point in time, it would be grant money, and it won't be coming out of your budget. That's correct.
Mr. Matussi?
I just want to point out, Your Worship, that virtually all the money that's there is provincial money. Right? I mean, the reality is that that because of the fire, because of the lack of taxes, the village is operating on a provincial grant to run the village for the next few years. And all the recovery money is, so it's recovery, it's money, Councillor Urquhart, some of the money is municipal affairs money in this pot, and some of it's ENBC money in that pot, but it's all provincial money. It's just been allocated from two different ministries for two different things. So the bottom line is it's all money that'll eventually come from the province. At this point in time, there's nothing that's happening here that will directly impact your tax at this point in time. You know, eventually there'll be costs that will start allocating and be put onto the tax base. But at this point in time, it's all basically using provincial grant money that's been given to the village to survive.
So we have an opportunity here to take a piece of municipal land and develop it for down the road with provincial monies, and really at no hard impact to our operation.
Precisely.
I
mean, that's the reality, right? Exactly. This is not coming out of a municipal reserve. This is not going to be money you have to borrow. This is money that's been allocated to help the village run administratively. So you nailed it.
Thank you.
Councillor Hay.
Last question, I got a little two of them, I guess, last one. Option one, if the go-ahead is given, how long before it's erected and people rent it? And my second one, which will make Mr. Matusi giggle, why are you going for 240? If the province is gonna give it, we might go for 2 million.
So we do have a modular unit in mind that has been provided to us through a very generous individual who has connections through to Lytton at a cost point that is beneficial to the village. It could be mobilized immediately. The site servicing will take longer, so I can't give you a timeline on it, but I think with approval and the funding in place, it is imminent that we can start moving forward with the opportunity.
So if I could, sorry, like I said, I don't want to get confrontational. I have to face the residents of when this is going to be up, and they're probably tired of looking at me asking those questions. Can we get some ballpark figure maybe for our next meeting?
I can draft up a schedule, Councillor. I would generally advise that you'd have to go through planning, a procurement, a mobilization, and so I could give you some durations for each of those phases in a best case scenario, so that we have a target that we're working towards and everybody's familiar with.
Yeah, much appreciated. Thank you.
No problem.
So would council like to put forward a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept option one.
I'll second that motion.
Discussion? Councillor Hay?
Time's my big one on it. Okay, my concern is getting something up for our people to use.
Well, James is going to get us a timeline for the next meeting, right? Is that correct, James?
So can we
Yes,
make
happy
this?
to do so.
Thank you.
I didn't drive to the meeting, that next meeting.
Do you want to friendly amend the motion to ask to ensure that we accept? What you could say is that you accept option one with the
caveats.
Yes, the caveat that staff will bring back a report June 22nd on timeline.
Yeah, thank you. You're the poet laureate here.
You. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion is carried. We're on to 7.2, which is the $50,000 ATCO donation that was received, and the recommendation is that the council received the $50,000 Canadian donation from ATCO and allocate the funds towards the rebuilding of Lytton.
Mayor, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Do our firefighters still need new equipment, or have we gotten that covered?
CFO Haas.
Thank you, Worship. Councillor Gray, I can advise that the Madam CEO, the name of the organization, the Fire Chiefs
Fire Chiefs Association
of BC,
Yeah.
has generously donated to date somewhere approximately $35,000 of equipment. And of course, we have the new fire truck that was paid for by our colleagues at the province. And of course, there was equipment that was not destroyed in the fire. So staff have asked the fire chief and his team to provide an inventory of the assets that they have currently, and staff are still awaiting that.
Councillor Urquhart?
Yeah, I'm a little confused. I've heard a number of quotes of numbers from 50,000 to 100,000, and even a published number by ATCO of 130,000. Is this just one payment of that, or were those other numbers not true?
As far as I am aware, this is the first payment.
First of more?
Well, it'd have to be the first of more.
I believe what he might be referring to, Your Worship, is I think at one of the, maybe it was the town hall meeting, you had mentioned that there was 100,000 from ATCO.
Yes, ATCO has said that they are going to donate 100,000, but so far they have donated 50,000. Okay, and they've also, said that they were going to provide a trailer, for the workers on site this summer, and I assume that that's 30,000. So that's, we haven't got the money yet, but that is what they've said.
I see. But it's not a contractual agreement. We're just waiting for it as a donation. I see they requested a receipt, a tax receipt for that.
Yes.
I see. Thank you.
So do we need a motion then?
Yeah, so you have a resolution started,
Okay.
and we just need to know where the funds would be allocated to.
So I'll make the motion that council receive the $50,000 Canadian from ATCO trailer and allocate the funds to a reserve until a decision can be made as where to spend it.
I'll second.
Discussion?
So is that a general reserve?
Yeah, just to protect it.
So does that mean that, is there a suggestion too that the next $50,000 go into that reserve as well when it comes?
That discussion hasn't been held yet.
Right.
Unlike some of our builders, I like to see cash in the hand before I start moving it.
Okay, I just thought maybe you'd like to amend it to include that, but okay.
We need a bylaw.
So is there any further discussion?
Technically, but we'll look into it.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So we are now on to 7.3, which is the corporate officer, and there is a recommendation that council appoint Shannon Story as the chief elections officer for the village in 2022 for the general local election.
Councilor Hayes, so moved.
I'll second.
Discussion? Is there any discussion on this matter? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So we are now on to 7.4, which is Public Works. And that is the boil water advisory notice updates. Would this CAO like to speak to that?
Yeah, so this was a requirement under the Interior Health, Public Health Officer direction, because the gravity feed, obviously freshet is making it so the turbidity is too high. And the UV, we actually have issues with the UV bulb being burnt out. So that's been an emergency order coming in, should be in here a couple of weeks from now, and then it'll be installed. So we're running off of well 2. And so if we do have to switch back to the UV system because of, sorry, the gravity, because the UV system isn't fully functioning, we had to do the water advisory quality, the quality advisory. Until further notice, until the end, until the UV system is fixed and or the turbidity is low.
So there's no motion in council.
There's no motion.
Okay.
It's legislative requirement.
Councillor Hay.
Thank you. The problem I have when we do this stuff is there's still huge, almost B trains going in there to fill up water from one of our hydrants. And we're punishing our, sorry, that's a wrong word, I'll retract that word. We're inconveniencing our residents, okay, because that 100,000 gallons or 10,000 gallons, whatever it is, still sucks out of our system. And what I hear, and I am absolutely no engineer, that our well motor may be running above what it's supposed to be. I would hate to see us burn out something that's producing water to our residents so we can give some people water. I know I trailed one of those trucks one day that was supposed to be doing stuff downtown with people. I was down Siska, I was going into the railway to work, and we saw one yesterday or today was way out.
Yeah, so you're correct. So through the winter, they were getting water, taking it to Tank Hill. They're paying the village $10 a cubic meter for the water. However, as I can look into this, and if council wishes, we can ask that they start finding a different spot for water for the term.
So I was sorry, I was approached by a resident that there is a policy we have in where one of our people is supposed to be there looking. One of our public works is supposed to be there manning that hydrant and getting paid for it. Yeah, because if that hydrant gets broke, we got a world of hurt. Some of the stuff, sorry, I was down that road the other day and it looked like somebody dumped 10 tons of salt in the road. It was just all stained white. I don't know what they dumped.
So what we'll have to do, because there's no policies, obviously everything is destroyed. So the current staff don't know that. So what we'll have to do is look into that. And then I do know other communities that do have those kind of policies that we can ask them to.
I mean, another way, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to.
No, I understand.
I'm not trying to burden you. Another thing is, they can give it a good deposit to use it. We'll give it back if the place is not wrecked.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, but that would have to be a fees and charges bylaw. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So there is a recommendation here that council received the June 8th, 2022 water operator needs report for information, and that council directs staff to review and respond to the interior health correspondence received from Diane Tessick, Nagala Manny, Health Special and Environmental Health Officer, regarding the interior health water conditions permit.
So your worship, if you are okay with that, I would ask that Matt Lane, who's on the line, speak to the staff report that's on page 28 that addresses this resolution.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Yep. So as noted in the staff report and in the report from Interior Health, we are in need of an actual certified water operator. In this report, we have put in options to rectify the compliance issue, being outsourcing to a third party for a water operator, hiring a new public works person who is a certified level 1 or 2 water operator, or approaching the LFN with a proposal for a joint operator that will be able to work for both LFN and the village of Lytton. This is a requirement. It's not something that we can take our time on. And as of right now, Interior Health have been kind to us with their recommendations.
Are there any questions? Councillor Hay.
Hi, Matt. How are you?
Good. Yourself?
I looked on page 30 and some of the higher public works level 1 and 2 water operators, $60,000 a year. Then I take this guy because it's about a 2-hour job every day. For the other 6 hours, he's going to mow grass for us, or is he just gonna be hired as a water tick man?
It would
I can
be,
answer that, Matt.
go ahead.
It would actually be for a staff member, so they would, their primary duty would be the water system as the, but obviously they would do other works, yes, yeah.
Councillor Urquhart?
Yes, we don't have anybody on staff at present time that is qualified.
No, one of your team member from the staff actually retired last March.
Oh, retired, I see, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is my understanding that the village needs a level 2 operator? Is that not correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Not a level 1?
So a level 2 is required. Interior Health has commented that they would accept a level 1 who's working under the auspice of a level 2. So a third party level 1 operator that reports to a level 2 would be acceptable.
So I'm gonna get off base here a bit. Things have changed since the fire, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Normal, before the fire, we're doing water 7 days a week. That means 2 people coming in, not 1.
But you can, as long as you have a level 2 or a level 1 that has a level 2 oversight.
Saturday and Sunday, we used to have 1 person on,
Yeah.
doing our stuff. That 1 person would have to be level 2 because he can't be level 1 by himself. Am I correct? I'm trying to understand the changes in IHA water and sewer, they boggle my mind. And I'm just trying to figure out, because what I don't want to do is, hey, we got a contract with a guy for 2 years. Oh, you need another one and that stuff. So I'm just trying to, what we need is a full complement.
So in the instance of a third party, it would be a company that's providing the level 1 who works under the level 2. Or in the instance of a shared operator from LFN, a level 1 operator that currently works at the LFN would suffice, as they are currently working under a level 2 or a level 3 within the LFN as well. So they would be reporting to someone that is a higher level. If it were to be an operator working directly for Public Works and the Village of Lytton, a level 2 required, or guidance provided from a level 2. So a level 1 with guidance from a level 2.
Or the level 1 would, guidance from a level 2, but the level 1 would also be in training to 2, okay.
Councillor Gray?
Thank you, Mayor. Matt, just a quick sort of double question. What kind of time frame would we be looking at if we attempted to hire level 2 or level 1 under a 2 water operator? And what sort of, how do I put this, supply is out there for that kind of qualification, or qualified person, I should say?
To be completely honest, I can't give a firm answer. It would really come down to the willingness of any of the operators that are out there that would be interested in relocating into the area. If there are any operators that want to move to the area, it can be fairly quick. We have spoken to a few that are within the region that they would not consider it for a part-time works. However, full-time, it may be consideration for them.
Okay. And Councillor Gray, just to add to that, we're required by IHA to have that in place by August 31st, 2022.
Okay, so is that doable though? Hiring at that quickly? Is it possible to get some?
So we're looking into the potential of having at least a consulting level 2 work with the current staff. And one of the current staff is taking some training for the level 1. So we're working with IHA and the potential to bring somebody in like that until we can, as Matt said, bring in a person that's interested in moving to Lytton.
Councillor Urquhart?
Yeah, Matt, have you talked to LFN? Do they have anyone available that could do this and would like to do this?
So currently the LFN, their operators are at full capacity. And so the joint operation that I've proposed in here would essentially be the hiring of an additional public works member through the LFN in order to free up their current operators to have time to work with the rest of the system.
See, do they have a level 2 that even if we hired somebody, they could work underneath?
They do.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah.
Matt, have you spoken with Jim Brown, the former Public Works lead person for LFN? He's now retired.
I've not personally. I would have to double check into my records. We did have a few third parties reaching out to the past operators and anyone else certified within the region. That's the interested parties that I did mention. I don't have their names in front of me. I cannot verify that for you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions?
I was just gonna say, Matt, on the lighter side, this was not paid by the province. This is gonna come out of our hide, and our CFO already set the tax rate, and I hear him gasping behind me. So this is not covered. This is gonna come out of our hide, correct?
It would be, yes.
Sorry.
So
But
for the
it
rest
sounds,
of the, go ahead.
if we do have somebody who retired last month, we must have a position available anyway, don't we?
They retired last
year,
March.
Oh, last March.
And so, yes, you were training a young fellow, and then he resigned in the fall.
I see.
Yeah. So for the resolution that's front of council this evening, it's not just for the operator, it's also for the report itself, for staff to work with IHA and carry on implementing and understanding the costs of the implementation of this conditional permit.
So we're not actually picking an option here tonight for.
You can, yes, you can. Yep. So that would amend the resolution, or you do a separate resolution. It'd be easier.
I'm not suggesting that. Okay, so getting back to the recommendation that staff work with Interior Health, is there any further questions on this matter? Would someone like to move the recommendation?
I'll motion.
Counselor A, second the motion.
Is there any discussion on this? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We are now on to water system funding. And there's a recommendation. And that there's also a report on pages 40 to 44. And would someone like to move the recommendation?
I'll motion.
I'll second.
I'll second.
Okay. Okay, discussion. This question is to Mr. High, and it's regarding well 2 and WSP. The village put out a contract for a groundwater development project, and we still haven't received the receivables from that project. And so I'm not in favor of giving them any more work until such time as they deliver. One, there was the risk of the pipe that went underneath the highway and under the railway. The liability issue there, they never provided it. The red line drawings for the project, they've never delivered them. The O&M manuals for the 2 wells, never been delivered. And so until such time as they deliver these, I'm not in favor of giving them any more work. Not only that, but they were the ones who designed well 2 and built it. And upon the operating of that well 2, we realized that the equipment they installed was barely adequate to perform the function of the well. So now we're turning around and asking them to create a report on the well. Would you like to comment on that?
Well, it was before I joined the village, obviously, when this work was completed. We certainly did look at the contract with WSP to try and determine how could we obtain the as-built drawings and O&M manuals, which we believe are required so that we can continue to do maintenance and additional work to that system. So there are 2 options. One is to work with WSP to obtain that information so that we can move on with the critical infrastructure in the village, or I suppose hire a new firm to come in and create a new set of drawings for us. In discussion with Matt, who's been dealing with WSP, we understood that the contract was essentially frustrated through the term. So you didn't receive the O&M manuals, you didn't receive the closeout information, but we also didn't pay them for that stuff. So what we've done is we've settled the contract with WSP, and we would like to enter into a new contract to receive the work, the items that we need to move forward with the critical infrastructure.
Respectfully, I was in negotiations with WSP for 1.5 years on these exact items. And while the WSP representative quoted the contract to the village on multiple occasions, when it came time for WSP's fulfillment of their part of the contract, they failed to do so.
I understand the frustration, Mayor. I obviously deal with consultants and contractors on behalf of owners all the time. I do find sometimes greasing the wheel is easier to get work done. So I have found that when I come into contracts or projects that are in dispute or unfinished, I tend to take the approach on how do we get to the end point the quickest. So I do understand the dispute. I certainly understand your feelings. And for me, it's not personal or emotional, really just trying to move forward on how quickly can we get the critical infrastructure in the village rebuilt.
When it comes to greasing the wheel, when I started negotiating with WSP, we turned around and I released in excess of $50,000 to them as a sign of good faith. That money went to Precision Pumps. And so I am not willing to enter into any more agreements with WSP until such time as they fulfill the contractual obligations.
So I guess my question now from the CAO chair is, where do you want us to move from here?
Mayor, if I may.
Councillor Gray.
Sorry, James, if I can just ask, what sort of costs are we looking at if we seek out a new company to take over WSP's spot? Because I came in very late to the whole WSP thing, but I tend to agree with the mayor. They have, I believe they have acted in very bad faith with the village. And I would not like to see them working with us again. If we don't have a choice, I do understand that. But if we could find someone else within the same kind of costs that we're gonna see with them, I would be more than happy to support that.
I would have to investigate it for you. Certainly we have choice. Absolutely, we have choice. I mean, consultants and contractors work for you as the owner, as the village, and you do protect the taxpayers' money. And so I totally appreciate that. I suspect it will cost more. WSP has the intellectual property for what they designed. They know the components, they know how deep the well is, what the pumps are. I think Matt has tracked down and is working with Precision Pumps, so we probably know certain components of the work that's been completed. But anytime I go into old facilities that don't have as-built drawings, to the mayor's point, it is expensive to try to recreate those drawings. And it does happen a lot with old municipal infrastructure that we don't retain the drawings very well. So often we will have to hire a third party. Usually we don't do it as a standalone endeavor. Usually we put it in their contract when we're doing work and say, we want you to recreate and then provide as-builts as part of it. So Matt and I can certainly look into the costing and bring a comparison back for you, or we can simply look for an alternative approach to moving forward with well 2. At this point, well 2 is functioning. So it's an approach that we're looking at taking to make sure that we're ready for any part replacements or any work that we need to do on well 2. So Matt, you can jump in if I'm wrong, but it's not critical at this point. It's something that we can look into for you and bring back additional options.
Would you be able to do that for the next council meeting?
Looking at you, Matt.
Should be able to, yes. Yeah. The well number 2 is operating currently. The other information that we do require is with the treatment plant itself. That's required for interior health, and is required for urban systems to continue with ensuring that the system stays in compliance.
And what are the chances that WSP is going to suddenly find religion and give us everything that they owe us? Try not to laugh, Matt.
I'm just going through it in my head here. So based on works completed and works paid out to WSP, there was additional works that were authorized that they had completed but had not been paid. That payment has been made, and they are in a position to move forward with the works. This request for the 20,000, it is not only for the red lines, however, it does also include an assessment of fire and flood damages to the infrastructure, which is a requirement for interior health, so we can find out what else is actually damaged in this system. So it's both the red lines and as-built drawings, as well as a damage assessment to the system.
Okay, and here's a sort of side secondary question to that. If we do move forward with using them, will one of you have a tight oversight on them? Sorry.
Very much so. I can work with them and receive updates. I believe their estimate completion on this work was a 1 month turnaround to be out on site. Myself, I can be there on site whenever they are on site doing reviews and meeting updates multiple times a week, whatever is necessary to ensure that they are proceeding and performing as required.
Okay, thank you both.
Matt, when it comes to the liability issue of a pipe that's 5 feet high from its drawing, that's underneath the railway track, and that railway track, if it ever gets washed out, is $1 million an hour. The village would be wiped out in about 2 hours. EXP did a ground penetrating radar study on those crossings, and they were to come back to WSP with the recommendations for an ongoing maintenance surveillance program of said crossings. Where is it?
I'm sorry, I'm not aware of any works with EXP.
Yes, they were hired through WSP to do that study, and that is why the $50,000 wasn't paid out. I paid out $50,000 to Precision Pumps for the work that they did. They pulled the pump out of well 3. They were very happy. WSP has a number of deliverables, very important deliverables to the village, and they have not delivered. Councillor Hay?
Mr. Hyde, maybe I can direct this to you. There's a history in town that only a few of us have. I think it's gonna be best if council goes in camera and discusses it. Okay, because we're starting to hear some laundry we shouldn't hear.
Yeah.
And we probably will be seeking some legal advice, and then we get back to you. I guess my question is, can an answer wait until next meeting on the 22nd?
There are other elements of this report that we'd like to move tonight. If there's an, and I don't know the process that well, but if we can remove that particular portion of it and still allow the remaining funding to proceed, then we could move forward with some of the other critical infrastructure items, Councillor.
Yeah. Thank you, because I was going to ask that question too. Could we move forward with the rest of the items other than the 20,000?
Then I have one other question for you. It says in your report that up to 80% of this is paid through our grant funding. And when I do 80% of 249,000, that's approximately 199,000, which would mean the village would be on the hook for about 50,000. Yet you're asking for 149,000.
So I'll answer that because I did look that up myself today. So if you look at the chart, the schedule, DFA assist, and then there's some with no DFA assist. So the dollar values need to be corrected to be, the total cost would be the 249,680 minus the 2684.16. And then the DFA assist is actually 39,101. The total projects from the village would be 195,000. So basically, and that money comes out of the $6.26 million grant. So the figures are, so the total cost of 249,680 is correct. What the chart needed to have separated out for you, which is fine, would be what the DFA assist total value is, which is 195,505. You take 20% of that, or 80, whichever you want. 20% is what the DFA will pay for. So the resolution would be that staff be directed to submit the funding approval for eligible works under the disaster funding assistance program for approximately 39,101.05.
I'm sorry, Leslie, just to clarify that with the wording there, the 249,680 is the total value. 149,899 would be the total value after assistance from DFA. So the 149 would be the remainder that's required for payment through the village.
It still didn't work out today, but we can sort that out.
Yeah.
Because if we remove the 20,684 for WSP, of course, that's going to change the numbers as well.
James or Mr. High, to do this properly, is this staff report, could it come back to the next council meeting, or are there items in here that are essential to get moving? Because we are in a situation, I do understand, where some of the stuff, if we can't get it sorted out, we can't move forward with funding requests either. You know, water is important, sewer is important, debris removal is important. It's all important stuff that we're trying to simultaneously move forward. So I guess I would need to know, if we can't sort out the dollar value here, are there some things that must go forward tonight?
I would hope that we would be able to resolve it today. We certainly have crews on standby, and we're trying to coordinate the work with MatCon on site while they're uncovering sections of the community. I might recommend that we put an upset value if it's about the dollars, so that we don't have to actually calculate the dollars, that we approve a maximum value that we could work from.
Okay.
And then we can sort out the numbers and bring back that actual for you.
Would that work for you, Your Worship?
Yes.
Okay.
Can we simply amend to remove the WSP section and say yes to everything else, basically?
With an upset limit. so that you have cost control.
Yeah.
CFO Haas.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think we still, if the council approves this motion, we still need to submit to DFA and wait for their approval. And not to poo or be negative, but the response time for approvals is not short. So, so maybe this motion can be amended to, probably should be amended, say, pending approval from DFA, because if the village has to fund the entire amount from the grant, that's a different thing.
Yeah.
So a query, I guess, for one of the staff would be this. If we put, pardon me, if we put the motion through for the amount of money, can we leave the doers off the table till we get into an in-camera and get through it? So that the staff can get this into the system and get the money. Because you're not, sorry, my thing is you're not gonna get the money for 3 or 4 weeks, so it doesn't really matter who you hire. You don't need the answer tomorrow because we gotta put the money, it's gotta go into DFA, the application, okay? So if we put in the application, doesn't matter if W, or what do you call them, does it, or Ian Hay does it, or James Hyde does it, doesn't really matter to you who you hire as long as you got the cash. Does it, am I making sense?
I think we can strike off the first item from the list. We would still like to put the DFA requests in. I know to the CFO's point, some of them take a while, but we've also seen short-term turnarounds too. So we may get to move forward on some of this work quicker than others, while the other ones get further analyzed. So if there is an ability and will of council to approve the remaining 7 items on the list, striking out the first one with an upset value to work against pending DFA approval, that would certainly be helpful for us.
Councillor Hay, I've got a problem with one other name on that list, why I want to go in camera. I have no problem with the money if we want to get it submitted to DFA for approval. I have no problem with that. I do have a problem with some of the previous history you know nothing about, that I don't want somebody to come and gouge us and be gone, don't do anything.
Yeah.
And sorry, that's why I want to go into in-camera and discuss this. So if you got a motion for the amount of money, okay, is that all you're worried about tonight? Because we have to approve it. DFA needs to know who's going to do the work? I don't think so.
They don't need to know who's going to do the work. They need to know how the means and methods and the quotes essentially that we can provide to them.
So James, we could simply use the recommendations as written since there's no names specified in them. It's just dollar values.
Yeah, the financial impact does have names associated with it. So you could pull that out. You could assign a number to each section and just put the financial values against it. And then we could work with that from an application point of view while we resolve the contractual partner.
Okay. Well, if we do that, then we can resolve, as you say, the contractual partner discussion in close.
Would you like to make that motion, Lillian?
I will. Did you get all that, Leslie?
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Can I
you.
get a seconder?
I didn't hear the motion. Sorry, I do apologize.
We're basically using a dollar value, Ian, instead of names.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Is there any discussion?
I just have a quick question. So with these proposals and applications and the dollar amount changes, is that going to affect it? Like, so if another company comes in and instead of $4,900, it's like $5,200, is that going to affect the application?
To some degree it does, but once we have a budget, we can reduce the scope of work, Councillor. So I think we can manage within that. At least it gets us moving. And if there's a shortfall because of a different quote from a different contractor, we would then have to come back and do another process or application to cover whatever scope we've removed. I think Matt has his hand up, but I think we can manage it.
And with DFA, once the initial works is approved, if we have to make a change to the dollar value simply because of a quote or an estimate change, they've been fairly quick to make minor amendments for minor dollar value variances.
Okay, thank you.
So hearing no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
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 You.
I believe that we are going beyond, we still have several items left, so we need to have a resolution by council to continue the meeting until the agenda is complete. What time are we supposed to be technically done? So you think you can get through these items by 10 o'clock? Okay.
You're gonna have to speed.
All right,
Okay.
move on.
So we're on to.
I do, I'll do it.
Okay, so we're on to 8 bylaws, policies, and resolutions. So we're on to building bylaw 710. And the recommendation is that the Village of Lytton's building bylaw 710 2022 be read for a third time as amended.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Is there any discussion on this bylaw? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You. So we're on to 8.2. It's the building bylaw amendment 711, 2022 for second reading. And the recommendation that I would like to make is that the recommendation that the Village of Lytton's building bylaw amendment 711 would be given a second reading, and it would be referred to staff to make the changes or to make recommendations based on the feedback that we have had from the general public. Once it comes back from second reading, we still have another opportunity to refer it back to our staff if it needs to be, if more changes need to be made, so that by the time it gets to third reading, that we have a fairly solid, bylaw to put forward. There's also some issues that need to be resolved, like propane tanks. We are at the moment looking at putting a propane grid through town like they have done in other communities. However, we do not know the cost of that yet. And so we would have, before we would go for a propane grid, we'd obviously have to find out what the cost is. And there'll be some other areas in this bylaw that, the staff will make recommendations to us on when they bring this bylaw back with the amendments.
Mayor, if I may ask Mr. Matusi a question, if he's still there. I was just wondering, we had heard that there was going to be some sections of 711 that might be pulled and added to other areas, other bylaws or policies. Has that been looked at, and do we know which sections are under consideration for that?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, the bylaw was put on the agenda. I guess when we were looking at it, we thought we'd have some time because it was being reviewed, and it was put back on the agenda and given a reading. So it, how we actually implement it, it could just follow this route and just be implemented, or my recommendation has always been that some sections of it can all be put into a wildfire development area permit, which is why I thought there was more time. Regardless, one of the things I've said to people at the CAC, and half of them are here tonight, but for some reason, I guess my message the last 3 times I gave it wasn't all that clear. was that at the next CAC meeting, we're going to have Mr. Blackwell, we're going to have Sophie, we're going to have a number of resource people that could sit at the CAC meeting, go through those 100 and 200 comments. And, you know, there's 200 comments, but there's about 3 themes, 4 themes. Most people have the same concerns, which is great. And go through them and try to separate out, okay, which can be mitigated. For example, you don't have to have concrete and gravel. It's pretty obvious. You could have irrigated vegetation around the building. There are rules, but there are ways to tackle this, and we know that. And there is a difference between the Firesmart and the regulations set out here. So I think there's some room to maneuver, and probably the best way to do is to have the CAC at the meeting. There may be things, there may be provisions in the bylaw that we may want to take out completely. That may be hard to implement. I know see Mr. Dickinson here, and maybe some of the elements may be really hard to get. So that's where I think the actual bylaw, we have to go through it now. We have the input, have the experts, and really go through it and say, well, do we really want this provision? Because at the end of the day, it's all about risk management. You don't have to put any of this in place. The more you put in place, the relatively safer your village will be. But that up to me is the decision of council, is where on that spectrum you want to be. And if being at the safest end of the spectrum creates a village that you don't want to live in or makes it impossible for you to build a house, then maybe a little more risk for a little more livable community is what you choose to do. But I just think it should be an informed decision, and let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's go through each of those things with the experts in the room, and then I think we can make a recommendation of where on that spectrum of safety the village would like to be.
And what's the next date for the CAC meeting?
I'm sorry?
What's the
I don't know. Leslie, is it
June
next
15, June 15, next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday, yeah.
Oh, okay, so we could possibly have some recommendations on this for next council meeting then.
Yeah, I hope so, because like I said, there were a lot of comments, but if you really looked at the comments, they were in about 3 or 4 general areas. The ability to have this material, or the types of things, the types of products that are being recommended. There was questions about the propane tank. Mr. Wagner's brought that up more often. And as the mayor said, there are workarounds just with propane. Firewood, vegetation. I think there's a lot of misinformation, or people are making assumptions about vegetation that don't have to necessarily get played out that way. So, hopefully we can go through them and separate out, what are the things you can live with and what are the things you can't, and come forward with a recommendation that works. I see Ron Dickinson's there. And Ron, do you want to add anything?
Thank you, Ron.
No, I agree with you. We're down to 3 or 4 issues. And to discuss whether it should be a development permit area or a building bylaw has a whole range of issues about it. That one of which is the flexibility of it if it's in a development permit area. But the other is that if it's part of the building bylaw, it only applies to the time when a building permit is issued. So it doesn't apply before, if nobody needs a building permit, and it doesn't apply after the building permit's closed. So whatever steps we take, we only take it during the building permit phase, because that's how the building bylaw is structured. So those are sort of 2 key things as far as how effective it can be and how broad we can apply it across the community. As far as the pieces go that we want to take out, that would be great at the CAC. And then I think as far as a staff person recommending things to council, I'm going to weigh it like 90% of what I think is going to be what is said by the experts. So that's really where I want to go with this thing. I don't feel confident about their concept of this enough to give council counsel.
So we would come back with recommendations, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Rickard?
Well, just from what I'm hearing and after reading all the complaints, I guess you'd call It sounds very much to me on a positive side that there's very little argument about the buildings themselves. The arguments are about from the buildings outward,
right?
The yards and the positioning on the property. I'd just like to emphasize that point, that people do seem to want to accept the idea of building a fire-safe home. And the rest of it, well, that may come up with some compromise, but I think the basic point of having a fire-smart home is a good one, and I think most people are accepting that.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think you're absolutely right. The building safety issues, nobody's really complaining about. It's a lot of the other issues, as you said, around the yard. And I think those are a matter for us now to go through in detail and make a recommendation back to council. Again, it's your village, and I think council has to be comfortable with the level of risk they're willing to accept by which of those provisions they don't want to accept.
Thank you.
So is there any further discussion on this matter, or we haven't made a motion yet?
Well, you made the motion, but you need a second.
Oh, I need a seconder. One of the reasons for bringing this as well to a second reading is so that it'll be some time before the zoning bylaw gets into place. And so this particular portion could well just be the stopgap measure between now and the time that the zoning bylaw comes into place. And the other reason to bring it to second reading is each reading takes a couple of weeks in this case, and September is coming upon us sooner than we think. And it's just to get ready, so that when people start putting their building permits in, that we're ready to, we have, how do you say that, the bylaw ready to go. Mr. Dickinson?
Yes, Your Worship, you mentioned timing and how important it is, and I agree with that. And I just wanted to remind everybody that there's another layer of approval that has to be factored into the timing of this, and that is, it's called concurrent authority. When we're trying to make regulations that the province already has regulations about, we have to go and ask them. And that's a big component of the 7-Eleven stuff. So the sooner we can get sort of a firm idea of what it's going to say, the sooner I'll feel comfortable sending it off to the province for their input. But I don't want to send it to them and then have to go back after second or third reading and say, oh, well, we're going to change this, because that just wouldn't go down well. So we need it pretty firm, pretty strong, and then there'll be some time, and they don't do this very often, so the time frame on their return time is uncertain.
So after third reading is when it goes to the provincial government prior to adoption.
I'll second the motion.
So is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So we are now on to correspondence for action. And that is the Fraser Canyon Tourism Signage Project Startup Meeting and Feedback Request. The recommendation is that council refer the Fraser Canyon Sign Project to the Community Advisory Select Committee for feedback relating to the tourism impacts to business recovery and land use relating to signage, and that the committee provide recommendations and feedbacks on the project to council.
Councillor Hayes, so move with the addition of the last, paragraph, that the committee provide, recommendation and feedback on the project to council by the first council meeting in July 2022.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion on this matter?
Has the Chamber of Commerce been involved in these discussions at all?
I believe they were the ones that led this project.
Yeah, I thought so. That's great. Thank you very much.
Hearing no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Then we have correspondence for information. And the recommendation is that council directs staff to receive the file items 10-1 to 10-3 on June the 8th regular council meeting.
Council, I so moved.
I'll second.
Through the mayor, just to note that there was an addenda to the agenda. The Lytton Chamber of Commerce correspondence is 10.4 on the agenda. So the recommendation should read 10.1 to 10.4.
Okay.
That's all.
And point number 3, just for clarification, should say BC Interior Community Foundation interest payment, not donation.
Interest payment. And that's 10-4 again was the chambers. Okay, so we have the recommendation, and you've made the motion to accept items 10-1 to 10-4. We have a seconder. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So we are now on to reports from mayor and council. I traveled on the Victoria Day long weekend down to Paradise, California to see how their rebuild is going. Takeaways, they found that they had not anticipated the number of people that chose not to come back or to rebuild. They're working on their infrastructure. They put 200 miles of electrical services underground. Their aim is to have the fastest internet service in California. And they are looking to make building in Paradise as as cheap and as fast as possible, when it comes to permitting and, getting the permits approved. They were sort of working on exactly what we're working on, and their fire was in 2018. They're also having issues with insurance. One of the things that they said, in order to get people to rebuild, they needed to have insurance that new or potential buyers could afford. They spoke about one house in Paradise where private insurance was obtained. The house is less than $1 million, and the insurance cost was $13,000 per year for the insurance. And what they basically said to me is if that was the cost of insurance for new builders, for people building new homes, there won't be anybody building new homes, because of course that's unaffordable. I went to the FCM in Regina. The politicians were happy that this was the first conference that was being held post-COVID and in person. They spoke about a grant that the federal government has put out for rapid housing. I met with CN and CP to discuss a time to meet to talk about fire protection for around the village. We also met with Bill Blair and Mike Farnsworth, and I made a trip to the Resiliency Center, and I'm looking, oh, sorry, I will be missing the TNRD meeting on June the 16th as we have a meeting with our local bands. That's my report. So Councillor Hay.
Thank you. This is, pardon me again. This is a bit of an update as to the donation and gift cards. Citizens Advisory Select Committee member Lightfoot and I made a successful team in gathering the cards distributed to those qualified for them. A lot of hard work and accounting went into ensuring the procedure was running efficiently. Thank you for your continued dedication to the village's residents, member Lightfoot. She diligently worked away securing names and addresses of those who were not able to make it to the Resiliency Center to pick the cards up in person on the 3rd, 17th, and 31st of May. It is believed no one was missed. On the 31st of May, we received a number of names of individuals who were entitled to receive cards, but had not been known prior to that date. So we worked a little magic to get those folks covered. And that brings me to the need to place 2 motions on the table regarding the donation and gift cards. Nikki, help.
Okay.
What I need to do is just change that date in there from the 1st of June to
Yes.
the 27th.
So just for everyone watching the meeting here, the previous resolution from council was that the deadline to distribute the CN gift cards was June 1st. So the motion that Councillor Hay is presenting this evening is that the deadline for the CN gift card distribution be extended from June 1st to June 22nd, 2022.
I'll make that motion. I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Pardon me. Next, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Huntley and Sharon Smith for their time spent cutting grass on village property on Loring Way, something which seems to have missed for our public works employees. Next, I've spoken to a number of residents with reference to the numerous dead trees still standing in the village proper. It wasn't that long ago that our forests were devastated by the pine beetle and all we could see was dead trees. A while later, they started falling and many of the logging roads and trails in which I used to hunt were blocked by these dead trees falling over by either themselves or the winds, which we were famous for. So the question I have for personnel working in the downtown area, conducting the recovery, who is going to be responsible to take down these potentially serious hazards? I do know the dangers of these, as I watched one resident conducting the sifting shortly after the fire, and had they been sitting there 3 days previous, they would have been seriously injured, if not killed, when a chimney collapsed and fell right where they were sitting 3 days later. So please let us get this looked after before we have a sad happening. Next, I had the opportunity to attend both the visits of government ministers, first Minister Bill Blair and then Minister Farnsworth. Both seemed physically moved by the devastation which hit our village and promised to assist as best their governments could. Parliamentary Secretary Rolly Russell was in attendance also, and he has been a staunch supporter of the recovery and rebuild of Lytton. And lastly, because of distributing the donation/gift cards, I was able to converse with many residents who otherwise I may not have had the chance. I receive a number of calls and texts daily from concerned residents, and the most noticeable open remark I hear is, quote, "Hi Ian, what's happening up there?" unquote. They realize that I am living in Lytton and they need to hear the results are at least weekly. I find it rather disheartening to have to answer that question. I personally have never rebuilt a town in my life, and I haven't even rebuilt a home in my life. So how am I supposed to know, quote, what's happening up there, unquote? I let people know this, and now I can see just how unhelpful my words are to those people. So after listening to several people over the past weekend, it sort of struck me. They do not need my half guesses. What they need is the answers from, quote, the horse's mouth, unquote, so to speak. So I want to put the following motion on the floor, as I truly hope and think that it will provide the information all residents who lost their homes and belongings with the wildfire damage done to our village. The motion is as follows. That staff produce an overview map of the burn part of the village with the quote zones, unquote, clearly outlined. Below this map, the individual street addresses of each and every property be listed on both the left and the right side. The list on the left side will depict in a color scheme, pardon me, as to what has been completed, what part, where debris removal is, where the heritage work's at, and where the soil remediation's at. This will let all residents know what has been completed on their property. On the right-hand side, the list will depict what is the planned work on each property during the next 2 weeks, utilizing the same color scheme. Furthermore, this map and information is to be placed on the Village of Lytton website no later than the 30th of June, 2022, pardon me, and is to be updated mid-month and end month until the village is ready for return to its residents. Thank you. Is that my motion?
That's your motion? You think I got your motion written down?
No, I'm trying to give it to you.
Would someone like to second that motion? I will second the motion. Discussion?
Who's going to put this together? The village staff?
Village
MatCon?
staff will instigate getting it put together.
I see.
It's basically, I believe your intent is that the contractor each week will update what is done and what isn't done. You know, like each week, you know, if he does your property, that, you know, there's a little blue line on it for this and a little yellow line on it for that. And each week you can go and, or every 2 weeks you can go and look at the map and see what's being done.
What has been done.
What has been done, yeah.
So I was wondering if Mr. High would like to comment on, I believe you do a monthly or a report for sure on the progress. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Councillor Hay. I totally appreciate what you're getting at. What is the plan and how are we progressing against the plan? So I do a monthly report. I started one in March as a draft just to get it out. I believe it was on the last council agenda. What it doesn't include is updates about the plan, updates about the progress that we've completed. It talks about the debris removal, the heritage. It talks about the aspects that you've asked for. It also talks about the plan for the water systems. And so I think we did put that on the agenda, and perhaps what we could do is put that up on the public website or have a portal for it so that we upload that every month. So I think it addresses the items that you're describing, maybe without the same kind of left-hand, right-hand detail that you envision it in, but I believe it carries the same kind of information. So maybe rather than create a new process for reporting out on progress, we could look at that or have a second look at that and see if that's appropriate for the communication.
What I'm intending by the motion is that anybody that's a resident who lost a house downtown at any time can go on the village website and get an update on what's happening to their place. Okay, I don't get the chance. I have people phone and say, "Can you check in my basement for taking out?" I ain't sitting up in that town, sorry. You know, that's just the way it is. So I don't have the answer. So if they can go from Nanton, Alberta, and look there and say, "Oh, good, this is being done, this is being done," it's a great thing. And again, I don't mean to be able to say that. We're seeing things from two different eyeballs. You're seeing it from the overall. I want to see it to the individual resident who doesn't have to, I wonder when this again, I don't know when this again. So they can go and look at their own little address, 47 Fraser Street, and say, they've done the debris removal, the heritage is done. Next 2 weeks, they're going in to do the soil remediation. So they can have an idea. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it does. Getting into the details, we do a lot of coordination with Heritage and Ministry of Environment and contractors and consultants and soil testing. So just trying to add one more layer of information out. I think it's doable, but I'm wondering if we could use a format that suits some of the information or the flow that we're already working with. So we're not creating another document or another tool or another process to our consultants and contractors. But I completely understand the intent of what you want to report and provide as much information and detail to residents as possible.
Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Mayor. There's a simple resolution for this. Sorry, I shouldn't say resolution. A simple answer for this. We can use the wildfire portal that was created by GOBC and use the overhead map that they have. It's an actual visual of the town. And that way nothing has to be recreated, and you could simply color code it, according to whatever you wanted. It's already created. And then we can give the residents access. I believe I've already given, I want to say Ron Matusi, the information, and possibly James for the contact there. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry, go ahead.
You did, Councillor. Yeah, I have the link.
Okay, so yeah, that would probably be the simplest way to get this information packaged up for residents to have access to, and for it to be simple for our staff to make whatever changes they want or additions on an ongoing basis.
Is there any for Councillor Hay?
One other thing for Madam CAO. I'd like to put a motion on the floor that we move the meeting past 10 p.m. tonight.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Oh, sorry. You currently have a motion on the floor right now, and we technically need to deal with it. So, and I would like to propose an amendment to your motion, Councillor Hay, because I took notes and I simplified the language. So I think it covers all your bases and what everyone's looking for here. So I know that you provided the written resolution to the CAO, but if you would like me to read aloud what I've put together, then you can treat it as a friendly motion, vote on that, and then you can extend your meeting. How's that sound?
I'm good with what you do.
Okay, I'm just trying to make a process work. Okay, so the resolution for Councillor Hay could be amended to read that staff produce a comprehensive and updatable map of the Village of Lytton remediation efforts, indicating property lots, status updates, and is to be made available to the public on the lytton.ca website as soon as practicable.
Better than I could have written it myself.
Okay, great. So that I think will cover everyone's bases. And if we can have a vote on that motion, then we can then go to extend the meeting time, because we are reaching almost 10 o'clock right now. Yeah.
So all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Now the motion to extend the meeting.
I make a motion that the meeting extend past 10 o'clock.
I'll second.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Councillor Gray?
I attended the meeting with Minister Blair and the walk through town. It was informative for him, I think, to see it firsthand, and he was extremely receptive to our needs. And I have a question that has come up that I'd like to direct to the mayor. There has been a question come to me about the offset of costs for building to net zero that the province had discussed. Have we had any information come from them as to whether they are going to do this?
The answer is no. But I will inquire, I will get back to you later, and I will go ask them for the answer to your question.
Okay, super. Thank you. That's all for me.
Okay, Councillor Michelle.
I did attend the village meeting with Minister Farnworth, and I got to meet the Parliament Secretary Rolly Russell, and that was about it.
Thank you. Councillor Urquhart.
Yeah, I met Minister Farnsworth as well, and his entourage, and did have a good conversation with Rolly Russell and also with Darlene Clark, who was available at the time. First face-to-face meeting I've had with her. Both were very good. Also had meetings mostly on telephones with Mr. Dickinson, Mr. Matuzzi, and Mr. Hay. Getting to know people. These people are all well known to most of council, but this is a fairly new situation for me, and I'm trying to develop a relationship with these people. So I can talk to them freely, and they are so important to Lytton's future at the present time. I think that's necessary. Other than that, most of my conversations have been with residents who've been phoning, something I'm sure other council members are quite used to, but this is a new situation for me. And so I'm answering a lot of long phone calls and responding as best I can with all the information I have. And I have a feeling that's going to be an ongoing situation. So after 1 month of this is all I've got to offer, I must say.
Thank you. So we're on to 12. This is reports from committees of councils and commissions, and 12.7 is the Unmet Needs Committee, the rescind terms of reference, and the recommendation that the Unmet Needs Committee be dissolved and the subsequent terms of reference be rescinded.
Mr. Matuzzi can speak to this? Yeah.
Mr. Matuzzi, would you like to speak to this?
Thank you, Your Worship. The matter now has been turned over to Jack Keel, and Christy Palmentier from ENBC is helping him, and they're putting together an unmet needs committee, which will be made up of NGOs. Some representatives, local representatives have agreed. Two Rivers Society have agreed to sit on it as local input. And their IHA, I received an email from Jack just last week to have a rep from IHA, and a number of other groups that they're adding. So they're rounding out the committee. It won't be a committee of council. It'll be basically a recovery committee that'll operate to try to coordinate to deal with the unmet needs of the individual citizens of the village and try to match the unmet needs. And when it comes to unmet needs, these could be very personal. One person may need, another person might not, to match those with the services provided by the various NGOs that are out there who are here to help. And it's a matter of matching up the need with the organization that's best suited to help.
Thank you. Would someone like to move the recommendation?
I'll motion.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Then we have the Citizen Advisory Committee meeting minutes and chair report. The recommendation that council received the minutes from the CASC committee for April 20th, 2022 and May 18th, 2022. Someone like to move that recommendation? Oh.
So moved.
Chair. Okay, you're moving.
I'll second.
Thank you. Is the chair actually going to make a report, or is that?
You could actually call the question.
Well,
and then ask Councilor Michelle if she wants to report.
All in favor? Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you. Sorry, Councilor Michelle, would you like to make a report?
I do have a couple notes from, so I can start with from the May 18th meeting. So one of the discussions is, or recommendations is that the council contacts the previous 3 alternates to fill the 3 vacancies on the committee. With Karen Kimball, Leanne Coughlin, and Angela Brown. I don't have their contact information. I'm not sure if Councillor Hay has it. Another recommendation that came from the May 18th meeting is regarding the any kind of filming done within the village. Some of the recommendation is that priority should be on the cleanup and filming, or priority on the cleanup, and filming should not be interfering or holding up any of the debris removal. Second, property owners should be approached for permission if their property is going to be involved. Filming should only be allowed for educational or fundraising purposes versus commercial and profiting. And then the last one to go with that is if somebody's in the village and they're filming, the committee is recommending that the village receives the footage to have like archive it or something, just so we have it on hand. And that was about it for May 18th. And then the June 1st meeting, again, it was brought up about recruitment of the members for the 3 open positions. We received a report on debris removal. I believe that was Mr. Matusi. And we also had a memo we received from James High regarding there was some questions from a homeowner. And the last one is the committee members are recommending that there is a report done up regarding the donation cards from CN. And that was everything.
Councillor Hay?
Councilor Michelle, I contacted those 3 people quite a while ago.
I thought so.
She's been planting, so she would turn it down. Karen Kimball said she got back to me. I find her an answer. But she had accepted and never Lightfoot was there at the time. And Angie Brown, I tried to get a hold of her through Warren, but I never got an answer back. Just to let you know.
Okay. So does the council decide on that, on who to fill those positions?
Those people were already passed. Karen Kimball automatically comes on.
Yeah.
Okay. Leanne has decided she doesn't want us, so she's gone. And Angie Brown can make a decision if you can track her down. If I see her down at her mom and dad's place, I haven't seen her in a long time.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have her contact.
Anybody else has through council?
Okay.
One question regarding your filming. I assume that's going all the news crews that are coming into town on for the 30th and the 1 year. I'm not going to say anniversary, but the 1 year date from the fire. That will apply to them.
That's how it sounded. Yes. So I don't know whether that would, for something like that, if there should be a notice given, posted on the website. I don't know, just to let people know. I don't know.
Councillor Gray?
You need to consider copyright when it comes to anything like that. Somebody who is creating a film, I know that you might think that because it's of your town, you own it. You don't. They own it, and they may not be willing to fork anything over. So it would need to be, you'd have to have a contract with them of some kind to
Oh, no,
establish
yeah,
getting
that was just points on what was said. It was that there would be like an agreement in place that they would have to give copies of that footage beforehand, or not beforehand, but they would have to agree beforehand before filming. Yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor Urquhart?
Yeah, I think there's going to be some difference there between journalism filming and filming for, say, commercials or any kind of commercial use. We can't stop journalism. That would get us in a lot of trouble. But anytime they would have to ask for a permit, certainly, which I would think would be necessary for a commercial use, then I think we might be able to have some impact on how these things are treated.
Yeah, the main reason is the people that are profiting off of it. That was the main consideration with the committee.
Yes,
you know, because you've got ATCO as a multi-billion-dollar company profiting,
and
right? So
CTV and Global, they're also for-profit news agencies. So one outfit's allowed to make money and the other one isn't?
Well, journalism is treated differently under
It is.
under the Constitution, so that wasn't our decision. News organizations do have certain rights that not everybody else does.
And what about people who take pictures with their cell phone and sell them? Are we going to legislate that as well?
I think the main thing is the transparency.
Look,
informing
a large donation and a trailer. We got quite a bit out of this.
I understand
it's not like they just kind of came in and did whatever they wanted. They did approach with care in mind, and the commercial that they put forward was filled with hope. So when you start talking about controlling how people can access things when they're willing to help us, I don't know,
I know, but it's triggering, you know, like there's a 7-year-old that recognized her property. Property owners weren't warned. They weren't given notice. All of a sudden,
actually, they were. At council meeting, there was a resolution passed to allow the filming. So
yeah, and not
as well.
Like even tonight, there's 22 participants. That's not the whole village.
Well, the whole village has the opportunity to come here and participate. If they choose not to do that, that's their business.
Fair enough.
Could I suggest that maybe due to the hour that this conversation be part of a strategic discussion with council?
We could take this matter up at a later date as it's getting late.
And through the mayor, staff are working on a filming policy. There's a bunch of ongoing policy work that is being researched. As soon as we have an issue that comes before us, we know that the village of Lytton needs a policy because all of the policies burned up. So right now what's happening is the corporate rebuilding lead, she's working on a policy to present and bring to council. And that is using with best practices from other communities that do have lots of filming requests for commercials or commercial purposes. So the best way forward is to introduce a policy that does give direction that will clearly outline what the parameters are. And those exist in communities across BC. So we don't have to invent the wheel on something like this. It's just a matter of looking at principles, best practices, and seeing what's a good fit for Lytton. So I do know that's in the work plan for staff. That's something that I was working on outside of this as well. So it's coming, but it's been noted for sure. But I think the CAO and myself have a long list of policies that we're looking at to introduce to council over the next few meetings. So this should be one of them.
Thank you. So I guess we have a recommendation that we receive the minutes from the Citizens Advisory Committee.
That was already.
We did that, okay. So have we voted on it?
Yeah.
Okay, good. We're on to new business then, sorry. There is no new business. So we have the calendar of events and outstanding items list. So we have on June 15th, the Community Advisory Select Committee. It starts at 4. Our next council meeting is June the 22nd at 7. June the 30th, the Village of Lytton Community Anniversary event is at 10 a.m. And July 1st, the office will be closed for Canada Day. And with that, we end the, pardon? Oh, yeah, sorry. We have the closed the meeting. The items to be released was resolution number 20-82C, and it was moved by Councillor Hay and seconded by Councillor Gray that the council appoint Michael Baker as the Chief Administrative Officer and Corporate Officer for the Village of Lytton effective June 27th, 2022, and that the mayor be authorized to execute the employment contract. Okay, with that, we're now needing the public meeting is closed, and I need a motion to go into a closed section under the community charter sections 91A, 91C, 91D, 91K, and 92B.
Second.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Oh, take 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you.
James, we need you to stop. We need James Hay to stay.
Yeah. James, we're gonna keep you for 1 minute in the encounter. That's okay with you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming. The meeting for the public session is now closed. So if you want to leave the meeting, just click the end button or leave at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. If you do not leave, I will manually remove you. It just may take a moment. And so we are in a 5-minute recess.
We don't need that.